What would a Nova Scotia election be without our political panel? We'll be hearing a lot from Harry Flemming and Parker Barr-Donham through the evening. They've set up shop in the Legislative Library with my co-host for the evening, Mary Jane Weber. Mary Jane.
Thank you, Linda. Yes, we're here in the library with some stately surroundings for Harry and Parker to tell us what's up. You two have covered a lot of elections in your time. How does this one compare with others, Harry?
We're going to see an awful lot of fresh faces around Province House. I did a count of the 156 candidates who ran for the three parties in '93. Only 49 are re-offering. By definition, that means this is the hardest election I've had to call, because in the past, while there were three parties, we've really only had a two-party race, because the NDP have always been marginalized. They're not marginalized now, and all bets on traditional seats, one way or the other, they're off.
Parker, it's been an interesting one.
It certainly has. With three parties, that means theoretically you could win a seat with 34, 35, 36% of the vote. Very narrow margins are going to divide these candidates. It's anybody who tells you they know what's happened in the last 10 or 12 hours of polling is talking through their hat. It's going to be a heck of an interesting night. What
should we watch for, the people at home? What are some of the specific things, Harry?
Well, of course, everybody is interested in their own constituency first, plus the overall. And we've got some very, very interesting races, and perhaps we'll get into that later. And of course, the main question is, are we going to have a majority government or a minority government?
Here's one that I'll be looking for early on. It's generally conceded that the NDP are likely to do quite well in Metro. They'll probably hold a few seats in Cape Breton, but if they are going to form even a minority government, they have to break through in some rural areas. So watch to see early on, are there any seats where you wouldn't expect them to do well in the outlying areas of the mainland where all of a sudden they're showing up in contention?
There are a lot of seats in rural Nova Scotia that went Liberal in '93 when you had the big sweep on, whose background, whose history is much more Tory than Liberal, and we may get into that later.
Quickly on the debate, a lot of people have said that was the turning point of the election. Would you agree, Parker? Harry?
I think it was the point at which people began to sit up and take notice, and I think it was the point at which the wheels sort of fell off the peekaboo campaign that the Liberals were running of not really trying to address the issues and talk to the electorate to try to sneak back into office. That's when that didn't work.
That's when the campaign really took off from what everybody acknowledges was boring, and it did take off, and nobody has said the last 2 weeks were boring.
No, they certainly weren't, especially with the Red Scare, as some people were calling it.
Right.
And,
or truth in advertising is another way to put it.
Well, we will be back to hear your comments as the night goes on, as in just a few minutes, hopefully. So, but right now, it's time to go back to Linda.
Thank you. He's one of the best at what he does in the country, and what he does is draw. As the evening unfolds, we'll be checking in periodically with the Chronicle Herald cartoonist Bruce McKinnon to get his thoughts. And since you'll see him in action later, we thought you might like to meet him first. Bruce Rainey now with a profile.
I always enjoyed drawing. Well, my earliest recollection of doing any drawing at all was I must have been, I don't know, 7 or 8, and I can remember trying to imitate a comic book drawing of Fred Flintstone and thinking I was pretty impressed with myself. And I just remember being able to draw what people asked me to draw. And, sometimes the girls would ask me to draw like animals and stuff like that. So it was a great way to break the ice,
For 13 years now, the Bruce McKinnon editorial cartoon has been a highly anticipated part of breakfasts all across Nova Scotia.
Today, I started with a little piece of paper, wrote some ideas or some issues down that I was that looked like potential things to go with. And the one I guess I like the most is on the there's a front page story today about Darryl Gray, Reverend Darryl Gray, taking a job in Montreal, and going from being a Baptist minister here to a United minister in Montreal, which is an interesting change. My favorite part of the job is caricatures. I love drawing faces.
And he's so good at it that twice he's been named the best editorial cartoonist in Canada. But even though he makes it look so easy, McKinnon says most times it isn't.
That's really difficult because a lot of the faces that you see that you think would be the best caricatures, like Jean Chrétien, can be really deceptive. And he's got all kinds of features that you'd think you can prey on. but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to look like the essence of Chrétien. So it took me a while to sort of feel comfortable drawing it.
And what about those who would be premier?
MacLellan is sort of chunky. He's a classic sort of looking politician. He's got the white sideburns and the big hair and a big round face. Kind of jowly, eyebrows, you know, strong, dark eyebrows. By and large, I'm getting a little better at MacLellan. Hamm is...
Hambo.
Hambo, that's right. Now that was a case where I actually had to draw a smaller head because the body was everything. You know, I have this huge body, so I'm drawing a little caricature, and you don't have to get into as much detail or accuracy for that matter. But yeah, Hamm is not a bad caricature. It's one of those ones that would grow on you after a while. You get a little better at drawing him. Robert Chisholm, still pretty young. Not always easy to grab in terms of his features, although he's got a nice hairdo that I can play around with, you know, so that comes in handy.
Bruce McKinnon is a self-professed, pretty nice guy on a day-to-day basis, but he says that doesn't stop him from occasionally hitting hard.
I think it's important to push the line in the interests of making strong statements, making people aware of the different sides to the story, and stating your opinion.
He says the cartoon that has drawn the most recent criticism is one that featured Alan Eagleson.
Eagleson, having just been convicted, ends up in a cell with Graham James. And the point I was trying to make, although the crimes are not equal, the fact is that I was trying to draw a parallel between predators in hockey. There are financial predators and there are sexual predators. And I remember getting at least one call from a family person who had said, you know, I have 6 kids, you know, they're hockey players. I encourage them to read the paper. They read this, and I just think it's not suitable for them. My reaction to that was, I have kids too. If my son is in hockey, and if I think he's old enough to read the paper, to read the editorial cartoons, I think that's something he should read, because I think he should be aware that there are both financial and sexual predators in hockey.
McKinnon says despite the occasional criticism, this is a job he truly loves.
There are days when the panic sets in late in the afternoon and I don't feel like I've got a decent idea, when I'd just rather be anywhere else on earth but here in this office with no cartoon. But I think, you know, those days are worth it. The fact is I get to draw for a living, and that you can't beat it.
Bruce Rainey, CBC News, Halifax.
Stay with us. We'll be back with a look at the colorful history of Nova Scotian elections, from free rum to the graveyard vote. That's next as our pre-election special continues. Don't go away.
There's got to be a morning after. Wednesday on Information Morning, the results of the provincial election and what they mean to you. Join Don Connolly and Elizabeth Logan, 6 to 9 on CBC Radio 1.
It's about troubled waters and the compass that guides you. It's about the challenges of life and facing them together. It's about the human spirit and the will to keep moving ahead. At Royal Sun Alliance Insurance, we've been helping people move ahead with forward thinking since 1710.
If I had $1 million, I'd buy you a green dress.
Well, not a real green dress, that's cruel.
If I had $1 million, well, I'd buy you some art.
A Picasso or a Garfunkel.
If I had $1 million, well, I'd buy you a monkey.
Lotto Super 7, fun to be rich.
Nova Scotians have been casting ballots for over 150 years now. But you know, it was not so long ago when elections weren't the up-and-up affair that they appear to be today. Reporter Rob Gordon has prepared this special election story on times past when even your local cemetery got a chance to place a vote.
It's a beautiful, stately building. It oozes class. But my, oh my, some of the things politicians past have done to secure a seat here. Nova Scotia has a colorful tradition when it comes to election shenanigans. It goes back at least 150 years. But first, a little official history.
Back in 1848, London granted the Nova Scotia legislature the right to levy taxes. That's called responsible government. Nova Scotia was the first place in the British Empire to get that right. In fact, we were so pleased with that right, we built a giant monument to responsible government. It's called the Dingle Tower. Imagine, we celebrate the day politicians got control of our money.
Nova Scotia has had 29 premiers. They've all been men. Women didn't get the vote until 1887.
And there has been an old tradition in Nova Scotia that almost anything goes when it comes to election time.
Tony McKenzie lives in Egerton, Pictou County. He's made a study of the curious marriage between elections, rum, and graveyards in Nova Scotia.
Many men would not come out to vote until they got at least a pint of rum. You brought them a pint of rum, sometimes a quart if they had a fair number of voting age people in the family. And then they would come to vote, but of course you could not be sure that they voted the way they promised.
How did you do that?
If you were able to get hold of some blank ballots, and you could mark an X for your candidate on the ballot and give them to them when they went in to vote, and then they brought out the blank ballot. That was one way. Another way...
That's why ballots today have a number on them.
Yes.
Graveyards also helped grease the wheels of democracy in Nova Scotia. It worked this way. Party workers would take names off gravestones and then give 4 names to each party voter. But how did that translate into 4 votes?
The old motto was vote early and often. You grew a beard before the election. You voted first with a full beard, then you voted possibly with the beard trimmed, and then with just a mustache, and then barefaced. You might vote 4 ways under 4 different names. I've heard of that being done in Halifax and Sydney and other places.
McKenzie says even in recent times, politicians and their workers have not been above shenanigans, if that's what you'd call it. Not long ago, the Liberals were caught charging liquor companies a special fee to have their products listed in the liquor store. The money went...
This will be a big night for Nova Scotians as we choose the government that will lead the province into the new millennium. Election 98 begins now.
We've put this balanced budget and fiscal management above all else. Are we going to have a balanced budget this year? You're darn right we're going to have a balanced budget.
If you do not bring in a balanced budget, will you resign as Premier of this province? Yes or no?
I believe if everything was as rosy as he tries to pretend it is, then he would have brought a budget in before this election. He would have come clean with Nova Scotians and laid out what was going on.
Live from Province House in Halifax, this is Election 98.
The final votes have been cast. The ballot boxes are being opened as I speak. And if the polls are correct, it could be the closest race in this province's history. This is Election 98 in Nova Scotia. Good evening and a special welcome to our viewers joining us from coast to coast on News World. I'm Linda Kelly and we're coming to you tonight live from historic Province House, the home of the oldest elected assembly in Canada. It's a remarkable building and you'll get to see some of it tonight. Let's go inside the Legislative Assembly. This is where our MLAs come to debate our collective futures. The first thing you see when you come in is these 2 impressive portraits. This one of Joe Howe, journalist and defender of freedom of the press. On this side, an early premier, James Johnston. They were political opponents decades before Confederation. But you know, in the mid-1800s, they survived their own nail-biting election, so I'm sure they would relish the tension in the air tonight as we find out who you have singled out for victory and for defeat. We are here tonight to report on a deceptively simple question. Who will occupy these seats once your votes are counted? It's an important question because you'll feel the effects of their decisions every day through things like healthcare, education, and taxes, and so much more. Just a month ago, Premier Russell MacLellan, who sits here, could not have imagined what the polls seem to indicate now, and that is a close three-way race. When he asked the Lieutenant Governor to call this election, the governing Liberals held 35 seats in here. The opposition, the Progressive Conservatives, held 9, the NDP held 4, and 4 seats were vacant. So tonight, the question becomes, who will sit here on what is known as the and who will form the counted? You the fastest and the most accurate results as they come available. Right now I'm heading down to the Red Room to join some colleagues. The halls here are lined with beautiful portraits of historic figures like this one of Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria was on the throne when Nova Scotia won the right to responsible government 150 years ago. It was a first for Canada and a first for the British Empire. Next, we have the Legislative Library, where my co-host for the evening, Mary Jane Weber, is standing by, and she is with 2 of Nova Scotia's most recognized political commentators, Harry Flemming and Parker Barr-Stenham. Mary Jane.
Thank you, Linda. Yes, we are in the Legislative Library, and this has to be one of the most impressive settings in the entire province, if not the country. This room also has a lot of history. The Supreme Court of Nova Scotia used to sit in this very room, and it is here that Joseph Howe, one of our most famous journalists and politicians, made his tremendous victory for freedom of the press. In this room, he convinced a jury that the people have the right to criticize their political masters. We're going to talk to Harry and Parker in just a few moments, but we have our first riding result right now. We're going to go to Linda Kelly for that result.
Thank you, Mary Jane. We'll get right to that result. It is from Cape Breton North. It's the Premier's riding, and there you see he has a lead right now of only 10 votes. Now it's early, one of 69 polls reporting. Next, Archie McKinnon for the NDP and Murray Johnston. So there you have it, our first result of the night, and it's the Premier's riding. What a way to start. We'll explain more of that, but of course, right now, back to Mary Jane Weber for Harry and Parker.
All right, we're back in the library with Harry Flemming and Parker Barr-Stenham. The first result so early, the Premier leading. What do you folks think?
Well, now, if the Premier should lose the election tonight, he will have the distinction of being the first Premier in this century in Nova Scotia to lead a party to defeat after one term. On the other hand, he could set another precedent by successfully, only for the second time, succeeding an elected Premier himself.
Parker? Historic night either way.
That's right. Either way, it's an historic night. Obviously, no surprise in that early return, but neither is there much information to base anything on. I'm just pretty much on the edge of my chair here, Mary Jane. It's going to be a very interesting night.
And you are literally on the edge of your chair. Thank you very much. We will be back with Harry and Parker as the events unfold, but now back to Linda.
Thank you, Mary Jane. I'm here at the entrance to the Red Room, which will be our home for the evening. This is the only part of Province House which hasn't changed much since the doors opened in 1819. That was during the reign of King George III, and that's his portrait on the back wall, along with his queen, Charlotte. Those 2 throne chairs are used for state occasions for the Lieutenant Governor, or the Queen, should she happen to visit. This is where the Executive Council of Nova Scotia met, and it was a privileged elite which answered only to the Lieutenant Governor, and that did not sit well with early Democrats like Joe Howe. But we hope he would approve of our journalistic assignment here tonight. Joining me on the desk is Jim Bickerton from St. FX University. Hi, Jim.
Linda, this is going to be quite a night in Nova Scotia politics. We've had a lot of change in Nova Scotia in the 1990s, and whatever happens tonight, I don't think Nova Scotia politics is going to be quite the same again.
Thank you, Jim. Now, along with Jim, Harry, and Parker, I'd like to introduce you to some other important members of our team. We have reporters standing by at all 3 party headquarters throughout the evening. Paul Withers is at Premier Russell MacLellan's headquarters in Sydney Mines. Cynthia Kent is in New Glasgow, where Dr. John Hamm has set up his PC headquarters. And Laurie Graham is at the Lord Nelson Hotel in Halifax, where Robert Chisholm and the NDP campaign have set up shop. We're expecting to hear from a lot of non-politicians too. We'll be going to the Dalhousie Student Union building in Halifax, where Bruce Rainey is covering the increasingly vocal student vote. We'll also be penetrating the inner sanctum of the Chronicle Herald building, where political cartoonist Bruce McKinnon is sharpening his pen. We have another result for you, this one from Pictou Centre, and look at that, the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party trailing by only 2 votes, but trailing nonetheless. An early result, just one of 63 polls reporting, but Jim,
well, and sometimes votes concentrate in polls. It's hard to tell from one poll what this means for Hamm, but Skoke does have some very strong supporters there in Pictou, and this poll may reflect where her support is concentrated.
We'll be watching that very closely now. Pictou West, Rob McDowell leading right now with a lead of, a lead of nothing. That's right. Caught me there for a moment. It's all tied up right now. One of 43 polls reporting early results, but interesting to see how things are starting to shape up. Charlie Parker of the NDP right behind.
And that riding is a traditional Tory riding, as all Pictou ridings are. And I think that they expected to be able to inherit that with their young candidate. And it looks right now like it could be a close shave.
Yes, we'll have to keep an eye on those ridings. Now, not to be left out, before we move on, I should mention to you our leaderboard, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen here. You can see now Liberals leading and elected in 3 ridings, Progressive Conservatives in 1.
That's the Kings West riding.
Kings West, let's have a look at it right now. There you see George Moody with a lead of 9 over Baden Thurber and Jackie DeMestral. One of 57 polls reporting Kings West with Progressive Conservative candidate in the lead. We now have Hants West. Ron Russell, the incumbent, looks like he's back. He has an early lead at this point, only 15 votes.
But those are 2 Conservatives that have been in as MLAs for 20 years, so they were expected to come back and win these seats.
Very well. Well, more results to come in the moments ahead, but in the meantime, while we go on, not to be left out, Bill Carr is lurking in the halls of Province House, and he's going to keep an eye on things. He has promised to put in a last word after the counting's over later this evening. Here in the Red Room, Claire McKenzie is with 9 people who represent a cross-section of interest groups, nurses, farmers, teachers, public servants, leaders of industry, labor, and social activists. Meanwhile, downstairs in the lower foyer, Catherine has 3 former undecided voters with her. They've presumably made up their minds, so we'll be hearing from them later on in the evening. There were so many people in the position that we decided to keep an eye on them. We have more results for you. Cape Breton Centre, Frank Corbett leading Steve Drake by 4 votes at this point. The NDP, this was a Liberal seat coming in.
This was one of the ridings I really wanted to watch because Drake is a UMW president who switched over. He was supporting the NDP in the federal election, switched over to run for the Liberals in this election, and there were some unhappy miners with that decision.
Once again, looking down at our mini board, you can see the Liberals leading or elected in 3, the Progressive Conservatives in 2, the NDP at 1. It's very early going. We will take a look now at how things are breaking down across the province, and there you have it, the Liberals right now carrying 39% of the vote share. That is a drop of 10 percentage points from the last election, but nonetheless they had a margin of safety coming into this election. You see, though, it's very, very close. The Progressive Conservatives at 36, the NDP at 25.
That 40% margin is significant because usually if a government wants to get a majority, they have to get above the 40% margin. So if the Liberals have slipped down below 40%, that's something to watch through the evening.
Now then, the lower level is also where we've set up our control room, and we've invited the public to come down and watch. But if you didn't get one of the tickets, you'll be able to join us in cyberspace. You will find us on the internet by logging in at, there you see it, www.halifax.cbc.ca. So get on the computer and see what's happening. Now, Jim, we have also made up some maps to give our viewers a bird's eye view of the political landscape going into the election, so let's take a look. This is how the province looked coming into the election. Lots of red, you see it there. If we take a closer look at Metro Halifax, you can see more red, 13 Liberal seats, 3 NDP, although 2 of those Liberal seats were vacant coming into this election. There you see them. We now go to industrial Cape Breton to have a look at how things looked there. Interesting as well, because of course it's where they hope to do well.
Well,
this time
it's
around.
in Metro and Cape Breton where I think you're going to see the NDP Liberal trade-offs. So those are interesting areas to watch.
Cape Breton was all red coming into the election with the exception of 1 NDP seat, 1 Tory seat. We shall see what happens as the night goes on. Now, to give you a very graphic picture of what the legislature looked like at the end of the last session, let me walk you through the chamber, courtesy of this computer animation, a little cyberspace trip through the chamber that you just saw me in moments ago. You will see in red the Liberals, and it was pretty overwhelming. In blue, the opposition, the Conservatives, and in orange, the NDP. As far as we can tell now, this color scheme is history. Who knows what the House will look like when the 57th General Assembly is called to order. We have more results. We go now to Cape Breton West. And there you see the NDP candidate Brian Slaney trailing Russell MacLellan. He has a lead at this point of 12. But there's the incumbent, Alfie MacLeod, trailing at this point.
Well, MacLellan was the MLA in this riding and stepped down and created the by-election, which MacLeod subsequently won. But it was a close three-way race that brought MacLeod in as the incumbent. So that's a riding. It's going to be very difficult to say who's going to win that riding.
You can see the Liberals leading or elected in 5 now, the Progressive Conservatives in 3, the NDP in 1. We go now to Guysborough, Port Hawkesbury. Ray White held the seat coming in. You see he's the incumbent, but right now he has a very slim lead over the Progressive Conservative candidate. Only one of 72 polls reporting at this point. So again, very early results.
Former Mayor of Cancel there, and if there is a challenge, it would probably come from the Conservatives in that riding.
We'll keep an eye on it. Cumberland North now, with one of 62 polls reporting. Ernest Fage has a lead of 45 votes right now. He picked up the seat on a by-election. Russell Scott currently trailing at 25 votes. Peter Stewart, the NDP candidate.
That's a big poll for Fage. This was a riding that was held by Ross Bragg, who resigned his seat and passed away last year. But Roger Bacon held that seat for many, many years, and it's a traditional area of Tory strength.
Cumberland North, Ernie Fage. Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley, Brooke Taylor, the outspoken transportation critic, has an early edge of 8 votes. One of 50 polls reporting, and they all went in Brooke Taylor's favor there.
There's another good indicator for the Tories. They're hoping to do well in these mainland rural ridings, and they need to win those ridings to do well tonight.
Once again, I direct your attention to the mini board running. Liberals now leading and elected in 6, Progressive Conservatives in 4, the NDP in 3. We can take a look now at how things are shaping up across the province. The vote change at this point, and the Progressive Conservatives now holding the greatest vote share, but it's a 3-way race. Gaining 7.4 percentage points. The Liberals still dropping at this point, almost 13 percentage points, and the NDP picking up some at 5.5.
If it stays like this, we're clearly headed towards a minority. None of the metro ridings have come in, and this is where the NDP really hopes to make its breakthrough. So I would expect to see that NDP popular vote go up. But if it stays like this, we are headed for a minority.
We have more results for you now. We go to Richmond, where Will McConrod is leading a very slender lead over the Liberal Michelle Sampson, and Frank Sutherland trailing at this point, although not so far behind because it's only one of 38 polls at this point. Halifax, Chebucto. Howard Epstein has a lead of 1 at this point. Again, a very close race. Kenzie McKinnon right behind him with one of 71 polls reporting a very close race in these metro seats.
And of course, Epstein is a well-known lawyer, Halifax councillor, environmental activist. He's one of the high-profile NDP candidates they hope would win there. Richmond is interesting. The NDP has never gotten more than 5 to 7% of the vote in Richmond. I know only 1 poll came in, but for the NDP even to show well in 1 poll is significant in Richmond.
Something we should get to right away is our magic number. One of the things you want to keep in mind tonight is this number, number 27. 27 is the number of seats a party must win in order to form a majority government. If no party wins at least 27 seats, Nova Scotians will end up with some form of minority government. To make it easy for you to follow that story, as I mentioned, keep an eye on the mini board, because that really tells the story of the evening. So as these numbers at the bottom of the screen inch their way up, every party is looking to hit that number 27. You see now the Liberals leading and elected in 9, Progressive Conservatives right behind them with 8, the NDP with 4.
And some of those metro ridings are beginning to come in, and the NDP, as a result, is picking up. Dartmouth East is one area where they are threatening the incumbent.
Now, even though the Progressive Conservatives appear to be picking up some steam, we can see, though, that the vote share is actually dropping, although at this point only about 2 percentage points. The Liberals at this point still holding a 40% share, although that is a drop of almost 9.5 percentage points. And you can see where those drops have gone. The NDP picking up at this point 11.4 percentage points.
And these vote shares at this early stage don't mean too much, because just a couple of ridings reporting in can change the vote share quite dramatically.
They're likely to flip around back and forth, seesaw in the
until later in the
next
evening.
hour.
Yeah.
Yes. Cape Breton East now one of 64 polls reporting. Clarence Rutledge is tied with Reeves Matheson at this point. Henry Boutlier right behind with 4. We move on now to Lunenburg. Lunenburg West, perhaps. There it is. Don Down, the Transportation Minister, with 1 of 64 polls reporting. Don Down is leading by 11 votes. Lou Senta is his closest challenger. Early results.
That would be a seat that traditionally Tory they would like to win back, but Down looks like he's doing very well down there.
John Leaf right now establishing an early lead. He's the incumbent, has been there for many years. Terry Doucette, his nearest challenger, a Liberal. That's with 2 of 50 polls reporting. So a few more polls coming in. The mini board continues to change. Liberals leading elected in 10, Progressive Conservatives in 10, the NDP in 6. It is a race.
It is, and there's some very predictable outcomes so far, and some unpredicted outcomes.
Well, this is one that Jim Smith probably didn't predict. He's the health minister, and he's at the moment trailing. Viola Huntington has a lead of 44 votes, the NDP candidate. Again, 1 of 44 polls reporting, but nonetheless.
It's a big poll. It's a big poll for the NDP, and Jim Smith is a 14-year MLA, and that was one seat I think the Liberals probably thought was safe for them.
Dartmouth North, you see Jerry Pye, the NDP, once again taking the early lead over Gloria McCluskey, former Dartmouth mayor. Mike Brownlow, son of a former Dartmouth mayor. 3 very high-profile politicians.
That's an interesting seat. We should keep our eye on that one tonight.
Absolutely, and you can just see the mini board. The Progressive Conservatives have jumped to the front now as the results begin to come in. We're going to take a look now at the Metro standings.
That's right. The Metro standings are important here because they'll start to switch around and they'll start to affect the party standings in a moment.
And with 6 of 16 ridings reporting, though, the NDP doing well, leading in 4, the Liberals leading in only 1, and the same with the Progressive Conservatives. So an early indicator,
and this is where the NDP really has to do well. They are weak in mainland rural Nova Scotia. They have to do really well in Metro if they're going to fulfill the promise of the polls.
Dartmouth East, once again, Jim Smith, the health minister, trailing not second but third in his riding. Viola Huntington with a lead now of 44 votes with 1 of 44 polls reporting. We move on now to Dartmouth North, where you see Jerry Pye. It's a small lead, but it's a lead nonetheless at this point. Gloria McCluskey and Mike Brownlow right behind. We move now to Dartmouth South. Bruce Hetherington with a very slender lead of 1 vote. It's 1 of 54 polls reporting, but there's Don Chard, the NDP candidate, right behind him, and Alan Billard currently polling 3rd. We move on now to Halifax Chebucto. Howard Epstein, 1 of 71 polls reporting, a lead of 1 at this point, so it's still wide open.
Those Liberal NDP races, we're going to see them all night long in Metro. The Tory lead right now is mostly because the northeast Nova Scotia seats where their strength is concentrated have reported in early, and that's being reflected now in the Tory leading seats.
And you can see it, 14 leading and elected, the Liberals in 10, the NDP now in 8. These are the kinds of numbers the NDP would like to see, certainly only much higher, they will hope, as the evening goes on.
Well, it's an indicator of what kind of election this is. It's very close races around the province, in different areas, stronger parties, and we're going to see this all night long, I think, these 3-way split in terms of seats and votes, and it's fascinating, really. As the night goes on, I'm going to be watching closely how these seats swing.
We're going to have a chance to see how the seats are swinging here in Metro and in Cape Breton. In Nova Scotia, the Liberal vote dropping by 12 percentage points from the last election. In Cape Breton, it's down by almost 20. In Metro Halifax, down by almost 11. But if we look at the NDP now, you can see that's where the votes have gone. They're picking up 12 percentage points province-wide. 16 in Cape Breton, 19 in Metro. What does it all mean, Jim?
This is exactly what the NDP wants to see early in the evening. It means that the NDP are picking up those disenchanted Liberal voters. It means that the polls, which showed very strong Liberal support in Cape Breton, clearly something has happened there. Support has drifted to the NDP, moved more than drifted, has moved sharply to the NDP in Cape Breton. This doesn't look good for the Liberals.
We're going to have a look now at some of the standings in the Annapolis Valley ridings. With 4 of 6 ridings reportings, we have the Progressive Conservatives leading in 3, the Liberals in 1, and the NDP not leading in any.
That has to be good news for the PCs. That's an area of traditional strength in Annapolis Valley. They wanted to win back a couple of Liberal seats that turned over to the Liberals in '93. So they need to win the Valley, they need to win in northeast Nova Scotia, and they want to come back in areas like the South Shore.
We go now to Hants West, where Ron Russell, the incumbent, he's been there since 1978. He has a lead of 15 votes at this point. Debbie Bowes right behind him with 20, and Dana Harvey in at 7 at this moment. Kings North is next, and there we see George Archibald, an early lead, just 1 of 50 polls reporting, but he has a 28-vote lead over Jennifer Foster. What do you think of
Neil? I think that this is no surprise. I think that the Kings South routing, I'm looking to see what's happening there. That's a little bit more interesting. But Kings North, Kings West, I expected the Tories to come back here, and Moody's doing well in his riding, Kings West.
There he is with the early lead of 9 votes over Baden Thurder. We have our first elect of the evening. Frank Corbett is elected in Cape Breton Centre. What a race that has been. And Jim?
Well, this is the backlash against Drake for running for the Liberals. I think a lot of people in that riding were disappointed that Drake decided to do that, and that's reflected in tonight's vote.
Absolutely, an exciting result there. There you see the NDP. This is an election flash, and you'll see these throughout the evening. It's at the bottom of your screen. It has a check mark on it with the candidate's name. When you see that, you know that that candidate has been elected, and we'll be flashing those up throughout the evening so you can keep track at home of who's winning and who's not.
And if you look at the leaderboard, the PCs with 17 seats, it's quite significant. The PCs came into this election trailing 3rd in the polls, but they fought a very good campaign. The question is, can they sustain this throughout the evening? Most of the early results are coming in from areas where the PCs traditionally have done well, and the question is, can they sustain that early lead that they've built up?
What are some of the other interesting areas of the province? We haven't
well,
heard
besides
a lot
Metro and Cape Breton. Metro and Cape Breton are the real head-to-head NDP Liberal races. The PCs want to do well in the rest of the province, mainland, rural Nova Scotia. But even within there's some interesting ridings. The NDP would like to make a breakthrough in Kings South. The Liberals would like to hold on to support in southwest Nova Scotia and other areas in the mainland. But there are those 3 areas that are important to see the differences in the party support in each of those 3 areas.
You might have heard a little bit of background sound through our broadcast, some applause. We have some people in watching our election coverage, reacting to the results as they come in. There they are. An exciting night in Nova Scotia politics, one not to be missed by anyone interested in what goes on in this house, Province House. There you are. Tell me, Jim, how did we come to be in a 3-way race here? What's happened since the last election?
Well, Nova Scotia politics has been changing in the 1990s, and I think the federal election was an indication of the kinds of changes that were occurring. It was only 9 months ago. Some people thought Nova Scotians would have scared themselves in the way they voted in that federal election. I don't think they did. I think we are witnessing a change in the political culture of Nova Scotia voters.
We're going to your neighborhood now, Jim Bickerton. We're heading to Antigonish to see how they're doing. Well, this was a Liberal riding since 1970, and now Highland Fraser's a Liberal candidate trailing to Andrew McNeil, the Progressive Conservative candidate. 1 of 63 polls reporting, so it's very early. So we'll have to keep an eye on that.
That's my home riding, and the Liberals, I think, are in some trouble in that riding. Coming out of their nominating convention, they weren't unified. McNeil has been on the ground for a year now. He's a good candidate, and I expected that the Tories would give a good run to the Liberals in this riding, and early indications suggest that that's the truth.
We go now to Argyll, and there you see a former Buchanan cabinet minister, Neil LeBlanc, with an early lead, one of 30 polls reporting, but there is a Liberal cabinet minister in a little bit of early trouble.
And these are the seats, those Acadian ridings, Argyll and Clare, where the Liberals wanted to hold on to those. But they're swing ridings. They've been Conservative, they swing to the Liberals, and they're often bellwethers of which direction the wind is blowing.
Alistair Surratt has a fight on his hands tonight, I'd say. We have more results for you.
Many of these PC ridings, they're leading in many, but not by much, so we could see some shifting in the party standings.
I suspect we may. Interesting. Hopefully we'll be able to touch base with some of the other... John Hamm has been elected, the Progressive Conservative leader,
and
picks
they
up
were
his
very
seat.
confident about taking that seat.
They
Roseanne
were.
Skoke is a high-profile candidate, but she's controversial, and she has strong supporters, but at the same time she has strong opponents, and they were very confident that Hamm would be returned in that seat.
And there you see it, Hamm with a lead of 441 votes. It was only 15 out of 63 polls reporting, but that's all it took for us to declare him elected. He defeats Roseanne Skoke, who made a run for the Liberal leadership. Judy Hughes defeated as well. We go now to Cole Harbour Eastern Passage, where Linda DeGraw has a slim lead over Kevin DeVoe. Randy Anstey right behind, a three-way race with one of 61 polls in what was a Liberal riding.
It was, but prior to '93, it was a Conservative riding. It was Tom McGuinness's riding, a Conservative cabinet minister. So I know the Conservatives hope to be able to get that back. It's interesting that DeVoe is the runner-up at this point, and this is one of those ridings where in Metro where the NDP hopes to be able to flip over in their favour.
We have another Progressive Conservative elected, Ernie Fage, back in again. He picked up the seat first on a by-election, and he's going back. 15 of 62 polls reporting. That was all it took. The toll highway, a big issue in that neighborhood.
Yeah, Cumberland, I expected the Tories would do very well in Cumberland, and they are.
Did you notice our mini board has just changed again? The Liberals have jumped ahead. The NDP has now jumped ahead. The Progressive Conservatives, just as you mentioned.
More ridings coming in from Metro. I think there's still 5 or 6 to report in Metro, and that's where the NDP strength is concentrated. So we could see the NDP creeping up here as those results come in.
Well, when you consider they came in with 4 and they're now at 14, leading and elected, if the numbers hold, it could be a tremendous night.
This is really quite incredible. It's almost a three-way tie right at the moment, 16, 15, 14. I mean, it's just as tight as everyone predicted it would be.
And speaking of tight, Eastern Shore, 8 of 60 polls reporting 220, 200, and 170 between Keith Caldwell, the incumbent, and the two candidates right behind him. Hants West, 1 of 57 polls reporting Ron Russell has a 15-vote lead at this point over Debbie Bowes. Dana Harvey trailing at this point.
Even in those rural ridings like Eastern Shore, where the NDP previously had virtually no support, you can see that their level of support has increased dramatically. So this is an indicator, I think, that the NDP has not just broken through in Cape Breton and Metro, but they're also building up votes outside of those areas.
There you see the Premier elected in Cape Breton North. Whatever battle he may have worried about, apparently it's all settled now.
And that's not too surprising. He is popular. He was a popular member for many years in Parliament for that region, and he is a popular MLA in that riding. So I'm not too surprised to see MacLellan repeat his by-election victory.
Yes, many people on the mainland may not have known who Russell MacLellan was, but certainly the people in his riding obviously do know exactly who it is, and they've sent him back for another term. Some interesting results. The Liberals now leading or elected in 17. The NDP at 15. The Progressive Conservatives right behind at 14. It is a three-way race.
It's a three-way race, and I think that we're definitely headed for a minority situation here. The split in the seats and the split in the vote is so even. It reflects the campaign. It reflects the change momentum from the start, where the Liberals had that comfortable lead, and it was slipping away through the campaign, and they hoped they could retrieve it at the end, but I don't think they did.
We are going now to Paul Withers, who is standing by at Russell MacLellan's headquarters. Paul Withers.
Hi, Linda. We're with Gary Penny, a very stalwart Russell MacLellan worker. Your reaction to Russell's election?
Well, there was no doubt in our mind. I mean, we worked at this for 40 days and we knew what the results were going to be in Cape Breton North. We're excited and we're happy.
What about what's been happening elsewhere on the island? Frankie Corbett took out Steve Drake. He's been declared elected. What's your reaction to that sort of thing?
We'll wait until the final results in before we have a reaction, but we're really confident on the majority government.
Majority government still. What's your concern about other seats? How many more can you afford to lose on Cape Breton?
We're not going to lose too many on Cape Breton. The results are not all in, but we'll see when the night's over.
Okay, Gary, thank you very much. We appreciate it. There's no doubt about it. What's been going on here, Linda, is that they have been screaming and hollering and happy as can be. And I'll throw it back to you. They're a little concerned about what's been happening elsewhere, though.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paul. Of course, we'll be back there. We go now to John Hamm's headquarters. Cynthia Kent is standing by. Cynthia.
Linda, I'm here with Cyril Reddy, who's on the campaign team for John Hamm. Cyril, John Hamm has been declared elected. Did you ever have any doubt?
Not really. One must never take the public for granted, but clearly here in the last month, the people of Pictou County, in particular Pictou Centre, wanted to make a statement, show their support for a man who's made a tremendous contribution to his community and to his province.
Now, people here have been pretty excited with the results that have been, the early results coming in. What do you make of what we've seen so far?
The results here are very clear in Pictou Centre. In the province, it's very far from undecided as the numbers keep bouncing around on the screen. There's clearly a three-party race, and we're going to be here a long time yet before this one's decided.
Thank you very much. Linda, back to you.
We're going to have a look now. The NDP have now moved into second place, and we're going to have a look now at how the vote is breaking down province-wide. And here you see how the picture looks now. The Liberals leading in 13, elected in 4 for a total of 17. Right behind them, the NDP with 16. Right behind them, the Progressive Conservatives. And we are now up to 47 of 52 ridings reporting. Let's look at how those votes have changed. The Liberals still holding 38%, but that's a drop of 11.5 percentage points, and you can see where those 11 points went. The NDP handily picking them up at this point, right behind the Progressive Conservatives with just a slight percentage drop at this point.
And that's amazing. It's almost a complete Liberal to NDP switch that's going on here.
Dartmouth Cole Harbour, Darrell Dexter has a lead of 88 votes over Cabinet Minister Alan Mitchell. Behind him, Michael McDonald, the Progressive Conservative candidate. That is now 5 out of 56 polls reporting. So Alan Mitchell is in some trouble at this point. We'll see what happens later in the evening. On now to Dartmouth East. Jim Smith is in trouble as well. Another cabinet minister trailing Viola Huntington now with a lead of over 200 votes. 5 of 44 polls reporting.
There's a lot of polls to report yet, and his vote seemed to be picking up a bit, but that's still a strong lead for the NDP candidate in that riding. I noticed earlier that Inverness was declared a Liberal victory. It's probably a bit of a disappointment for the NDP. They hoped that that was one of the rural seats where they thought they had a chance to make a breakthrough this time, and the Liberal vote was split between two Liberals, and but it appears that the Liberals have won Inverness again.
We have more results now. We are headed to Dartmouth North with 10 of 54 polls reporting Jerry Pye is still holding on to his lead. Well-known local politician, but also 2 more well-known politicians still duking it out behind him, Gloria McCluskey and Mike Brownlow. But right now, Jerry Pye with a lead of over 100 votes. More results. We go to Robert Chisholm's riding, where he has a lead of 50 votes at this point, 1 of 52 polls reporting. Right behind him, the young Darren Watts, and behind him, Gloria Redden.
That's pretty telling. That's pretty telling, that first poll, though, I must say. Usually when you see a poll come in with that kind of spread, it's a good indicator of how that constituency is going to go. Huge spread in votes there.
He's fought some battles in that riding.
And you know, that's right. He only won by a very narrow margin over Randy Ball, the Liberal candidate, in 93 and again, or 91 and then again 93. So.
All right. Next riding, Halifax Bedford Basin, and look at that, the NDP currently leading by 21. Jerry Fogarty, former Speaker of the House, trailing at this point, 5 of 67 polls reporting, so it's close. 134 votes for Michael Madalena. Could still be a 3-way race there as well, I would say.
This is one of those metro ridings.
Halifax Shabukto, Howard Epstein, a lead now of 157 votes. Building his lead, 13 of 71 polls reporting. Kenzie McKinnon behind, Sean Phillips trailing him. If we look at our board, Liberals leading or elected now in 20, the NDP leading or elected in 16, and the Progressive Conservatives in 13.
Still 4 to go.
We go now to Laurie Graham, who is standing by at NDP headquarters. Laurie Graham,
Thank you, Linda. The excitement is starting to mount here at the headquarters for the NDP. I'm joined by Elizabeth Ware, leader of the New Democratic Party in New Brunswick. Ms. Ware, how are you feeling here this evening?
God, I'm so excited I can hardly breathe. I think what we're seeing tonight is the proof that the federal election was no fluke, and that Nova Scotians and that the Maritimes have decided that their traditional support for the Liberals and Conservatives simply isn't meeting the needs of this region. So it's an exciting night, but I think it's going to be a long one.
So far, it's been fairly close, although it's only early on. What are you anticipating here in Nova Scotia?
Well, I think that in the last week or so, we've all expected that it is going to be a close race. But what we're seeing tonight is the support that people were talking about is real. They've taken their votes today, they've put them in the ballot box, and they're electing New Democrats.
Why would you come over from New Brunswick to see a Nova Scotian election?
Well, Alexa McDonough is a very good friend of mine. Eileen O'Connell is, Robert Chisholm is. You know what we do in our party? We help each other out. And Nova Scotians have helped us in New Brunswick. So it's like it's time for the family to get together.
Well, thank you very much for joining me here this evening. That's Elizabeth Ware, leader of the NDP in New Brunswick. Back to you, Linda.
Thank you, Laurie. Well, it will be an exciting night for the NDP. If these numbers hold, it will be a breakthrough night for them. But it's early yet. We're going now to Cape Breton Centre. It's an elect. Frank Corbett is elected in Cape Breton Centre. Steve Drake was unable to hold the seat of the mini board at this point. A tie. Liberals 18, NDP 18, Progressive Conservatives 14. We go now to Cape Breton East. Reeves Matheson has now taken a lead of 486 votes over Clarence Rutledge. This was a Liberal seat coming in. It'll be interesting to see what it is when we leave.
Yeah.
Up next, Cape Breton the Lakes. Helen MacDonald leads by over 100 votes. Alan Henderson and Rowley Clark trailing at this point. Helen MacDonald held the seat coming in.
Yes, she won that seat in a by-election, so and she's a popular MLA down there, so I'm not too surprised she's winning that again. But the NDP have to be pleased with what's going on in Cape Breton. The Liberals have held on to some traditional Liberal seats like Inverness and Richmond and Cape Breton South and Cape Breton North, but the NDP appears to be winning a few as well.
Our next result comes from Cole Harbour Eastern Passage, where Kevin DeVoe now has over 300 vote lead with 10 of 61 polls reporting. We go now to Dartmouth Cole Harbour, where we see Darrell Dexter with a lead of 88. The Justice Minister has not made up much ground since last we checked in on this board. 5 of 56 polls reporting. We go now to Dartmouth East, 10 of 44 polls reporting, and Jim Smith is still struggling. Viola Huntington at this point with an early lead of 130 votes.
And all of these Metro ridings, it's Metro seems to be going in a wave now towards the NDP, and there's around the province there may be more mixed results, but in Metro it seems to be clearly going strongly NDP.
Dartmouth North, there you see Jerry Pye with a lead of 147 votes over former Mayor Gloria McCluskey, and Mike Brownlow trailing at this point. The NDP have jumped to the head of our mini board with 18 leading and elected. The Liberal have dropped down to 17. The Progressive Conservatives at 15. And it's just switched again. Dartmouth South, Dawn Chard for the NDP leading at this point, a lead of 39, but it's close between the NDP and Liberal challengers. We move on now to Robert Chisholm's riding. He has increased his lead to almost 400 votes now with 9 of 52 polls reporting. I'm sure he enjoys those more comfortable margins than he's had in the past. Halifax Bedford Basin, outspoken dentist Dr. Errol Gomes still leading now by almost 120 votes over former Speaker Jerry Fogarty. Michael Madalena trailing at this point with 17 of 67 polls reporting.
And a number of these ridings, their leads are very slim, 10 votes or less. So that could easily switch around as we go along, but regardless, this is an incredible result we're looking at here. 3 parties in a virtual dead heat at this stage. One thing that we can say is that the Liberal attempts to scare Conservative voters into their camp to keep NDP candidates from being elected in Metro, that didn't work.
All right, we're going to take a look now at some of the areas where the Liberals are leading. Laurie Montgomery has a lead of 7 votes. This was Earl Rayfuse's seat. He held it. He passed away earlier before the election. We go now to Antigonish. Highland Fraser has now picked up the lead there, a lead of 143 votes. This was Bill Gillis's old riding.
Yes, some of those traditional Liberal voters are cashing in their votes at the moment.
20 of 63 polls reporting. At that point, Highland Fraser leading, and Maurice Smith, the NDP candidate. Robert Chisholm has been elected, I'm told, in Halifax Atlantic, and that will be good news for him early on in the evening.
Well, he had close fights the last 2 times he was out, so I'm sure he feels good about this early declaration tonight.
Perhaps a sign of more interesting things to come with his party tonight. Certainly, it's already a very interesting night for the NDP.
Already for the NDP, it's a huge breakthrough. Nova Scotia political landscape has clearly been altered. It doesn't matter what happens now, that much we can say for sure.
Cape Breton North, the Premier, of course, elected, there you see it, by a margin of almost 1,400 votes. We are looking currently at seats where Liberals are leading or elected. What's next in Cape Breton? Cape Breton Nova, veteran, maverick MLA, Paul McEwen, there he is with a 354 vote
And it really
lead.
doesn't matter who Paul McEwen runs for in an election, he's going to win that seat regardless.
They were expecting a challenge from the NDP, and it's not so far behind. We move on now to Cape Breton South, where Manning MacDonald, Minister of Economic Development, will come back to the House of Assembly. He had a large lead margin. 35 of 55 polls was all it took to declare Manning MacDonald.
Long-time Sydney mayor, popular MLA. I'm not too surprised Manning is taking that seat.
The NDP had hoped to give him a run for his money, but
they're not doing too badly.
He has taken it. Russell MacLellan is back. He's represented the riding before.
And sometimes it pays to be a rogue MLA or a rogue MP. Russell MacLellan spoke out against the Savage government and ended up resigning his seat. Came back now with the MacLellan Liberals, and people are rewarding him for taking that stand.
The Progressive Conservatives losing that seat. Alfie MacLeod was the incumbent coming in, and he will not be back. Wayne Gaudet, Minister of Business and Consumer Affairs, right now holds a lead down in Clare with 11 of 34 polls reporting. Guy Leblanc at 718, so still possibly a race there tonight.
This is a repeat of the last election. These two went head-to-head in the last election as well.
Colchester North now. There you see Ed Lorraine with a lead of 78 votes with 6 of 52 polls reporting. Janet Mabey is the NDP candidate. She's almost up to 300 votes. Andy Williamson trailing at this point with 200. The Liberals now leading or elected in 20 ridings. The NDP leading or elected in 16. The Progressive Conservatives right behind at 15. Eastern Shore now. Keith Caldwell, the incumbent, continues to carry a lead of 58 votes. 11 of 60 polls reporting, with Greg Brown, the Progressive Conservative candidate there, Darren Richard trailing for the NDP. We look now at...
Well, almost all of these seats, we're looking at sharply reduced pluralities for the winning candidate, whether it's a Liberal or a Conservative. Everything has tightened up. The NDP vote has floated up, even in rural areas in Nova Scotia, and it's made these races three-way races. It's very interesting what's happening.
All of the leaders have now been elected, all three party leaders. There you see Robert Chisholm elected for Halifax Atlantic. We assume John Hamm is next, and there he is. John Hamm elected. Roseanne Skoke unsuccessful in her challenge in Pictou Centre. Always a controversial, interesting candidate to watch, though. And, of course, Cape Breton North, the Premier, Russell MacLellan, elected. Back again.
So clearly we're looking at a minority situation. It doesn't look like anybody's going to make it to 27 seats here tonight. And it's going to be very interesting what occurs from here to the end of the evening as to how those seats change around and what strategies the parties will adopt as a result of that.
They are inching ahead, but no one near 27 at this point. And the way they've been flipping back and forth and seesawing. But we have some more results. Oh, Francine Cosman has now rebounded. She is currently leading now with 5 of 61 polls reporting. She has a lead of 33 votes at this point. Peter Christie reporting with 287. The battle of the former Bedford mayors there.
Yes, and I'm sure that the Liberals, given the way things are going tonight, are breathing a little easy that a few of those metro seats they're holding on to at least. It seems to be just keeping them in the lead at the moment.
And the lead she has. Paul McEwen is back, elected. He was first elected back in 1970, and he'll be back again.
Much better showing by the NDP there this time.
Yes, very strong. Cape Breton, the Lakes. Yes, Helen MacDonald now with a vote lead of almost 200. Alan Henderson is the next challenger. Rolly Clark is trailing at this point. We look now to Chester St. Margaret's, where Heinrich Bitter-Surman, a transplant surgeon, is leading the cabinet minister, Jim Barkhouse, but it's only a 52 vote spread with 25 of 59, close. Doris Maley polling strongly, but not too close to the leader
and
at this point.
Barkhouse has been the MLA for 14 years there, although prior to that it was a Tory stronghold, but I'm sure the Tories are hoping they can steal this one from the Liberals. There's one riding not yet reporting, and that's Halifax-Needham, where the count has been delayed. And that's one of the areas where the NDP hope to be able to take a seat from the Liberals.
Interesting to see these results as they come in. Now we go to Clare, where Wayne Gaudette, another cabinet minister, holding his own there, a lead of 224 votes over Guy LeBlanc, former Buchanan cabinet minister. Vanessa Paddock trailing for the NDP at this point. So a cabinet minister in good shape at this moment. Ed Lorraine also, a lead of 78 votes, 6 of 52 polls reporting. Janet Maybe, the next candidate, the NDP candidate, and Andy Williamson currently running third in that riding.
It's a very good showing too for the NDP in a rural mainland riding.
Some rural breakthroughs happening here
for them. There is, even if they don't win the seat.
Even if they don't pick it up. We have more results now. Cumberland South, where Murray Scott has been elected. Cumberland South, this was Guy Brown's riding. And look at that.
They have to be very happy about taking that seat, the Conservatives, because it was Guy Brown's riding for so long, and he couldn't pass it on to Ubroy.
Mike Ubroy had some concerns coming in that he was a little late off the mark and a little worried about that, and it appears Murray Scott picked up the seat. We're going to have a look now at how things are shaping up now with almost all of the polls, the ridings reporting, 51 of 52. We have the Liberals leading and elected in 20, the NDP leading and elected in 16, the Progressive Conservatives leading and elected in 15, coming in with 9. There should be some excitement at the PC headquarters right now. And
I'm sure there's excitement at all the headquarters right now.
I'm sure there's excitement of all kinds. Now we look at Cape Breton with 10 of 10 ridings reporting the Liberals leading or elected in 7, the NDP picking up 3. The Progressive Conservatives have lost. Of course, they lost Alfie McLeod's seat. We move on now to Metro Halifax, the NDP leading or elected in 11. Those are the kinds of numbers I suppose they wanted to see. Liberals at this point 4, Progressive Conservatives.
1 riding yet to come there, Halifax-Needham.
Yes, 1 left to come, that's correct. We have more results. Looking at northeastern Nova Scotia with 11 of 11 ridings reporting the Progressive Conservatives. This was their area of the province tonight. So far, leading or elected 7. The Liberals at 4. The NDP at this point not leading or elected in northeast.
And that's where they showed well in the polls. That's an area of strength for them, the PCs, so they are capitalizing on that tonight. So again, here we are, 19, 16, 16.
There we are, is right.
It's not clear at all. It's not clear at this point at all. Well, the Liberals have an advantage in forming the government. Who will be the opposition? Everything's still up in the air.
Well, and as you say, Jim, here are some of the reasons why it's just too close to call at this point. Look at this riding. Hants East, Jim Smith, the Liberal candidate, is only 115 votes behind John McDonnell, the NDP candidate. So a very close race there with 22 polls reporting. Sackville Beaverbank. This is Bill McDonald's riding coming into this election, but right behind him, the NDP candidate, Rosemary Godden, with 4 of 49 polls. Very close. Bedford Fall River. Another horse race. Look at that. Peter Christie now has jumped into the lead, but only by 8 votes. Francine Cosman now slipping into second. Halifax-Needham apparently is still voting. There is a huge lineup. It will be interesting to see what effect that has on the evening.
A number of these seats, there's just a few votes separating the first and second place party. Liberals over the NDP, PC over the Liberal. So the party standings as they are now, 18, 17, 16, that could easily switch around, and we could be looking at the NDP in the lead, the PC in the lead. It's really quite incredible.
East. Well, there you see Cabinet Minister Jim Smith has pulled into the lead now, a lead of 40 votes, but not so far behind. There's Viola Huntington. Again, a close race, 15 of 44 polls reporting. We move on now to Halifax-Bedford Basin, where Jerry Fogarty is still struggling. Dr. Errol Gom leading by almost 120 votes. Very, very close. So you can see why it's just too soon to know.
We could be here a long time tonight, waiting for those final votes to come in, and Needham is still voting, so it could take a while for us to tell who even can declare victory tonight.
In a situation where every riding counts.
Absolutely.
We're going to take a look now at some of the ridings we haven't had a chance to look at yet. Dartmouth Cole Harbour, Darrell Dexter elected. The Justice Minister has lost his seat. Alan Mitchell has not been re-elected. Darrell Dexter and the NDP pick up Dartmouth Cole Harbour. We move now to Digby Annapolis, where Gordon Balser, the Progressive Conservative candidate, has taken the lead in what was
Joe Casey's riding.
John Drish, not so well, 100 votes behind at this point. Steve Downs trailing for the NDP, but still a strong poll.
Very strong poll for the NDP there, and I'm sure that the Conservatives were hoping to take this. Now that Casey wasn't running this time around, he was ousted in the nomination meeting by John Drish, and they were hoping they could take that.
Halifax Citadel, Ed Kinley leading by 47 votes. He picked up the seat in the November by-election, but Peter Delafis right behind.
Just 6 polls. I'm sure that we're going to see some changing around of the vote in that riding. That's a very interesting riding as well to watch.
The NDP have high hopes for that one.
They do.
Hants East, John McDonnell is now leading, the NDP candidate. He has a lead of almost 140 votes. Jim Smith, the other Jim Smith, is right behind him with 1,400 votes.
And this is one of those peripheral ridings. It's just outside Metro, and I think that the NDP support has managed to reach out into those constituencies bordering on Metro.
Interesting results indeed. We move on now to King South. Robbie Harrison, Education Minister, has an early lead at this point. 17 of 59 polls reporting. David Morse is his nearest challenger.
And that's been a Conservative seat with Harry Howe. It's been an NDP seat with Bob Levy. Harrison won with less than 30% of the vote last election, so that was one riding I wanted to see how it would go. And 17 of 59 polls, I think we're still going to see some movement tonight down there in King South.
We move now to Lunenburg, where Lila O'Connor, the incumbent, is trailing. Michael Baker is leading now by more than 180 votes. 46 of 66 polls reporting. Marilyn Crook, strong showing as well.
Strong showing for the NDP there, but that's a traditionally Conservative seat. They hope they could take back that seat in this election, and their candidate's doing well.
185 vote lead. Pictou East, Jim DeWolf with a lead of, he's elected with 23 of 45 polls reporting. That's all it took. Incumbent Wayne Fraser will not be back.
That was Donnie Cameron's seat.
Have picked up Pictou East.
That's right. That was Donnie Cameron's seat. The former leader of the Conservative Party. So it has returned now to the Conservative Party after Wayne Fraser, who was defeated twice before he won in 1993. It looks like it's gone back now to the Conservatives, definitely gone back to the Conservatives now. But those Pictou seats, they were all strong Conservative seats traditionally. And the Tories are picking up their traditional areas of support. There's underlying patterns here, even amongst all this change.
We have more results now, this time from Preston, where we see the Cabinet Minister, Wayne Adams, is trailing at this point. Yvonne Atwell leading by more than 140 votes. That's with 8 of 20 polls reporting, so Wayne Adams is in some early trouble. Ross Eisner currently trailing in third.
That's an interesting result, because Atwell finished third, I believe, in the last election, and for her to be leading at this point, it's a very good indication of how that Metro vote has swung in a wave. That's right, across the NDP.
We have more results now. Sackville Beaverbank, Rosemary Godden leading for the NDP, a lead over the incumbent, Bill McDonald, in some trouble right now. Lead of 131 votes, 10 of 49 polls. Well, close again.
And we can see
Steve
what's
Taylor,
happened
not so
here
far
too.
behind.
I mean, the Tory vote has not collapsed. There hasn't been a rush to the Liberal candidate to prevent the NDP candidate from winning. Instead, the vote has split, and the NDP is benefiting from that.
We move now to Shelburne, where you see Cliff Huskelson, the incumbent, has a lead of almost 300 votes. Cecil O'Donnell for the Progressive Conservatives, his nearest challenger. But again, almost 1,700 votes for Derek Jones.
And that's a very strong Liberal riding. It's been Liberal for 45 years.
Timberley prospect now. We'll see how this Cabinet Minister Bruce Holland is trailing at the moment. Bill Estabrooks for the NDP.
Oh, it's tied now. The Needham result has come in, and evidently that has brought the NDP up even with the Liberals.
Needham reporting, that means all 52 ridings are reporting, and at the moment a tie. The Liberals leading and elected in 18, the NDP leading and elected in 18, the Progressive Conservatives just 2 seats behind. We go now to see how Eleanor Norrie is doing. No, we go first to Halifax Needham, where Maureen MacDonald, the NDP candidate, has an early lead. Just 3 of 63 polls reporting. It'll take them a few minutes to catch up with everyone else, but great to see them in the race now.
In the race. And a good result for the first 3 polls. She has a strong lead after 3 polls.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to see now what the political panel makes of all of this. Harry Flemming and Parker Barstow were standing by with Mary Jane.
Thank you, Linda. I think the Oscars came a night early. We have a contender tonight for most dramatic picture, I think. Harry, what do you think of what's going on?
Pretty much is what the so-called pundit said. Cape Breton.
That would be us, right?
That'd be us.
That would be you guys.
Cape Breton's gone 7 Liberal, 3 NDP. The last I looked in Metro, it was going NDP 11, Liberals 4, Tories nothing. Hants East is interesting.
Yeah.
That historically was a seat, when it was a rural seat, that would vacillate between the Liberals and the Tories. And the NDP are leading, and I think it's an indication that Hants East could now be considered largely an appendage of Metro. In other words,
right.
Largely, The one point that I might make just on a personal note, Cumberland South, which Guy Brown used to win by as much as 75% of the vote, is going at least 2-1 for the Tories. Shows what a tremendous constituency politician Guy Brown was.
You're right. Parker, what do you think?
It shows you what paying tolls every time you go for a drive will do for you,
well.
too. A couple of quick notes. Paul McEwen's margin, he had the largest majority in the province last time. He's winning, it looks like he'll win by 500-600 votes.
Yeah, a lot tighter.
That's the least he's won by, at least I would say, since 78, possibly, well, it's more than he won by. But the NDP got the 3 seats they hoped for in Cape Breton. They're cleaning up in Metro, but they are not making that breakthrough.
An NDP win in Yarmouth.
Yeah, well, there you go. There's like the first big breakthrough for them on the mainland. Yeah. They're not getting the rural seats that they would need to catapult into a government situation. Women candidates. Not a good election for women. We have, I think, only 2 elected, 1 and 2 leading. Well, now 3 leading with Maureen MacDonald. So only 5 of the 30 women candidates are currently looking like they're going to make it into the legislature. And one of those is Yvonne Atwell, and that could change.
I see that my old hometown of Truro has returned to its Tory roots, and that really was not unexpected.
Now, Alfie McLeod shut out in Cape Breton. That leaves the Tories out of Cape Breton.
Placed 3rd there. Yes, they're shut out there. Not a big surprise there. I think the Tories knew Alfie was going down.
All right. Well, we will be back as this nail-biter continues. Right now, though, back to Linda.
Well, we have some close Liberal races, some close Liberal leads that we're going to have a look at now. Of course, there's close races everywhere. We go first, though, to Guysborough, Port Hawkesbury, where Ray White has a vote of, only a vote lead of only 21. Ronnie Chisholm right behind him at this point, Wendy Panagopoulos. So this is a very tight race. We have another tight race here in Halifax Citadel. Peter Delafis just behind Ed Kinley. Just 44 votes separating the two, with 10 of 95 polls reporting. Dartmouth East. Jim Smith holds on to his lead, but it's only 76 votes. 20 of 44 polls reporting, and Viola Huntington is hanging on.
And these are the ridings that could determine the election, because they're all slim Liberal leads. And if those leads flip over, the Liberals go into second or even third place. And so these are the key races right now. Will the Liberals be able to hold those slim leads, or will they flip over to one of the other parties?
We're going now to check in with Laurie Graham, who is standing by at NDP headquarters. Laurie.
Thank you, Linda. The excitement is mounting down here at NDP headquarters. I'm joined by Bruce Cox, who managed the NDP campaign. Bruce, how are you feeling this evening?
Well, it's a real dogfight. We're feeling very good. We've made extremely good gains in all sorts of seats, and we're feeling pretty good here.
Now, while Robert Chisholm was out shaking hands and meeting the public, you were in the back room involved in strategy. What was the strategy?
Strategy was to try and talk to as many Nova Scotians as we could throughout the campaign, and to make sure that we got our message out, and I think we've succeeded.
It's very close, obviously, too close still to call. What are you predicting?
Well, I won't be predicting anything this evening, not for a while yet. It seems to be very close.
What are you hoping for?
Good question. I think it's just much too close to call this evening. It's right now we're in a dead heat, and well, it'll be a long evening, I think.
All right, Linda, back to you. Bruce Cox from the NDP.
We now are going to take a look at the standings province-wide and see where things sit right now. There you see it, with all 52 ridings reporting, the Liberals leading or elected in 18, right behind them, tied with them, the NDP leading and elected. Well, the NDP elected in 14, now for a total of 18. The Progressive Conservatives elected in 9, so they've already held their own in this election.
This is nail-biting time for the Liberals.
But 14 seats for the NDP, from 4 to 14.
This is incredible. The whole result is incredible. There's no other province in Canada with politics similar to Nova Scotia at the moment. It's quite unique. And when we see the NDP leading or elected in 14 and the Liberals elected in, I think it was 8, or it was much less than that, it means that it's the Liberals right now that are in the greater danger of losing the lead.
And there you see 7 Liberals elected in Cape Breton, the other 3 seats going to the NDP. The Liberals had said they'd do well, and they have a very strong showing.
Well. They
there.
haven't cleaned up as they hoped they would.
No.
They did win those rural Cape Breton seats, and the NDP hoped to make a breakthrough there. They didn't do it.
Metro now. All 16 ridings reported, 10 NDP candidates elected. The critical Metro battleground is showing its stripes tonight. The Liberals leading in just 2 at this point, the Progressive Conservatives in just 1. A big night for the NDP in Metro. Annapolis Valley with all 6 ridings reporting, and there you see where the Tory strength was tonight. 3 leading and elected so far, 2 Liberals leading, 1 NDP candidate. Perhaps not the inroads they'd hoped to make there.
No, perhaps not, but then again, the NDP strength was not on rural mainland Nova Scotia or rural areas anywhere. They have broken through in a couple of rural areas. I noticed that Yarmouth elected.
There's the South Shore. Speaking of Yarmouth and area, 5 of 5 ridings now. We see the Progressive Conservatives leading and elected in 3, the Liberals right behind it, 2, the NDP in none of those ridings. We move on now to southwest Nova Scotia. The Progressive Conservatives leading and elected in 2 there, the Liberals in 1, the NDP in 1.
That's the Yarmouth seat.
Yeah.
That's the Yarmouth seat. That's a big surprise, and the NDP has to be quite pleased about that. It's a breakthrough in an area where they never got more than 5 or 7% of the vote previously. So a major breakthrough for them down there.
We have more results, perhaps. Well, at the moment we can just move on. There it is, northeast Nova Scotia. And there you see the Progressive Conservatives making some gains there, a total of 7 votes, leading and elected at this point. The NDP at not making, at this point, any breakthroughs there.
Yeah, and I think the Liberals have they've held on in a number of ridings in northeast Nova Scotia, where the Tory strength was greatest, and as well as down in the Valley and in the southwest. So they held on to enough to keep them in a slim lead at the moment. But you know, it's clear that that we may be looking at any one of these parties possibly being in the lead at the end of the evening.
We now go for some voter reaction from Catherine Clark, who's standing by. Catherine.
Linda, 5 weeks ago we asked 3 undecided voters to share their views on how they voted, watch the elections, and talk about the turning points. They are now decided. John Lukeman is a retired school teacher from Port Hawkesbury, and he's joining me tonight. John, first of all, how did you vote?
I voted Conservative.
So what was the turning point for you? Because you had quite a battle, didn't you?
Yes, well, I think Russell's lack of candor on a balanced budget and his insistence on doing the P3 school funding without any more input, and of course the debate was a key turning point for me. Russell did very poorly on the debate. There was a lack of substance to his arguments, and he just had a one-point argument. That was the Medicare medical funding.
So when you look at those results coming in tonight, what are you thinking?
Pretty exciting. This is a news junkie's delight. The only thing is a little concern for Port Hawkesbury. The fellow I voted for, Ronnie Chisholm, he's just a little bit behind, a couple of dozen votes, but there's still lots of the evening left to count some more votes for him.
Well, thanks very much for sharing your voting secrets with us.
My pleasure.
That was John Lukeman. Linda, back to you.
Thank you, Catherine. Well, we have some more results for you now. We are going to head out to Victoria, where Kenny McCaskill will return as MLA for the area. The incumbent is back. He has been re-elected.
He's been the MLA for 10 years. That's traditionally that's part of Russell MacLellan's federal seat. When Russell MacLellan was an MP, it was expected to go back to the Liberals.
We are now going to check in with Cynthia Kent, who is standing by at John Hamm's headquarters. Cynthia.
Linda, I have with me Peter MacKay, a federal Tory MP for this area. Peter, what do you make of this three-way race?
Well, I don't think there's much of a surprise here. This has been the talk all day, that it was going to be very, very tight for all the parties, that it may come down to a difference of 3 or 4 seats as to who forms the government. So not really a surprise as far as I can tell.
Now, what do you think the chances are of a coalition government in a situation like this?
Well, should the Tories find themselves in third place, I think Dr. Hamm is going to be in a very, very interesting position. He would certainly be talking to the Premier, whoever that might be. But John Hamm has he's run a very, very good campaign, a strong slate of candidates, a terrific platform that was open and showed the numbers. So I think he has to be very pleased with how things have gone for him this evening.
What does what happened here today and what happened during the federal election say to you about the future of the Tory party here in Nova Scotia? Well,
I think the Tory party is firmly ensconced in Nova Scotia. We've put together 2 back-to-back strong campaigns. The electorate have returned to us. They have shown that they put their trust in this party, and we have tried to reflect that in our platforms and in the issues that we're discussing. So I'm very happy and very optimistic at the support that's been shown for the Tories.
Thank you very much. Linda, back to you.
We have more results for you now as this exciting night in Nova Scotia politics continues. Eleanor Norrie has lost her seat. Jamie Muir picking it up for the Progressive Conservatives. We move now to Yarmouth, where incumbent Richie Hubbard has lost his seat. John DeVoe picks it up for the NDP. A big win for the NDP in Yarmouth.
And we appear to be edging, as the night goes on, we appear to be edging closer and closer to what would be a Liberal minority. There's still a few seats out there where it's too close to call at the moment, but we're leaning in that direction.
Edging that way. Paul Withers is next. He's standing by at Russell MacLellan's headquarters. Paul.
Thank you very much, Linda. I'm with Gary Corsano, a longtime Liberal, well-known here in the island. And Gary, what do you think we're seeing happening here? And let's talk a little bit about whether Russell MacLellan could ever get past the legacy of John Savage.
Well, I think if this election occurred a year ago, the Liberal Party may have been completely obliterated in Nova Scotia. So I think that when you look at the results coming in tonight, it's significant. It's important for the Liberal Party that it is done as well as it's done. I think most people thought that the Liberals would perhaps, if they were lucky, were going to form the majority government. Obviously, that hasn't happened, but the party has survived and still is doing very well, and will lead the government.
Gary, what do you think happened in terms of the campaign that the MacLellan team put together out of Hollis Street, out of the Bank of Canada building on Hollis Street, that bunker down there? What kind of campaign do you think it's been? Just briefly.
Well, I think it could have been much more effective. I think the NDP did a very effective job, especially in the age of negative advertising. Perhaps it's not the style of Russell MacLellan, who I consider a friend. But it was effective advertising, and I think it attempts to affect.
Thank you very much, Gary. We've just run out of time. We'll throw it back to you in Halifax, Linda.
Paul, we are now going to hear from Roseanne Skoke. She's currently she's not there. I'm afraid we have lost her. Oh, we do have her. We're going to hear from Roseanne Skoke, if we can hear. But there we see her. At the very least.
When I entered this race, it was a fight that had to be fought. Certainly everybody likes to win the fight, but that's not always the way that it works out. I'm really proud of the efforts that I made and the people that supported me. I appreciate that and want to take the opportunity to thank them for doing so, and as well for all my organization. We worked really hard. We have a strong organization, and we're going to be around for some time.
Now, you've always been quick to remind us before that you've never lost an election campaign at the polls. What does this mean to your political career now? This is sort of a new experience for you.
Well, it's a new experience, but in politics, no. You know, a defeat is not necessarily a defeat. And as far as I'm concerned, there's some victory in this. First of all, John Hamm borrowed my slogan, putting people first. I've had that slogan since 1993, so finally the people accepted it. I think that's great. He used it all across the province. I also think, let's face it, we're right here in the heart of Torytown, Pictou Centre. I knew when I entered this race I could have picked another seat somewhere in the province that, no problem. The Liberal wave might have carried me there. But when I entered this challenge, I knew what I was in for, and I accepted it. I worked hard in the short duration we had. In my opinion, it was not a particular, the Liberal campaign itself wasn't as flamboyant as I would have liked it to be, so I had to work within those limitations. And I'm proud of what I did do. I worked hard, and so did my people.
Has that turned out to be a mistake tonight?
What do I do now? Well, I'm a practicing lawyer, so I'll continue to practice law. In fact, I was practicing law today, on election day, and I'll continue to do that. I'm not going to close any doors to any opportunities that may present itself. I don't know what that might be or when it might be, so I don't like to speculate.
So are you keeping your door open for politics?
Has it been, do you think Russell MacLellan made a mistake in the way he's handled this campaign? You said it wasn't flamboyant enough.
I don't want to comment on that, in terms of what I'm saying is my style is to be more flamboyant. We never had an opportunity to have any debate, between Dr. Hamm and myself, or to discuss publicly any of the issues, for instance. What I had to do was conduct a traditional door-to-door campaign, which is fine, but given the short duration of the campaign, it's hard to knock on every door, and when I did do, you have one-on-one contact, which is extremely important. So
that was Roseanne Skoke. You heard her live right now. She has lost to John Hamm. John Hamm, the Progressive Conservative leader, took the seat from her, and he had at least 2,000 votes more than her.
Comfortable margin.
We could call that a comfortable margin indeed, but some not so comfortable margins out there tonight. One of them being the riding of Halifax Citadel, where Ed Kinley currently is hanging on to that lead, but it's only 82 votes and only 13 of 95 polls reporting. So again, very, very close. Tara Erskine has picked up some as well. She is now 330.
That could be the key riding at this point. If Kinley can hold on, then the Liberals will be safe. If Kinley falls back behind Delfez, then we're looking at a tie between the NDP and the Liberals. So this riding is a key riding.
Speaking of close calls, Guysborough, Port Hawkesbury, too close to call. 30 of 72 polls reporting. And right now, Ray White has a lead of only 37 votes, which he's been hanging on to that slim lead for the night.
And obviously, that's the other key. Those two ridings, Halifax Citadel and Guysborough, Port Hawkesbury, right now, very slim Liberal leads. If both of those flipped over, we're looking at a different situation here. If the Liberals can hold on, then the Liberals will form minority government. So we have to watch those two ridings.
We are now going to hear from Claire Mackenzie. Claire.
Thanks, Linda. And we too are surrounded by history on this very exciting election night. An impressive statue of Joseph Howe just behind us here. I'm joined by Heather Henderson, the president of the Nova Scotia Nurses Union, a union, of course, that has been literally in the middle of this election campaign from the get-go. Heather Henderson, tell me, what effect do you think your union's protests throughout this campaign has had on the election?
Well, I have to be honest with you, Claire. When the election campaign first started, it seemed rather boring. And once we became involved in negotiations and things were not going too well and our members started to turn up the heat, things became a lot more interesting.
What have been the major issues for your union throughout this campaign, apart from the wage parity with the QE2 counterparts?
Certainly for all of us, healthcare has been a number one issue. And our members, as nurses providing healthcare, frontline healthcare providers, are very aware of the changes that the Liberal government has made in healthcare and how detrimental that has been to the work life of nurses, the workload, and what's happened to Nova Scotians. That's been the number one issue for us.
So what will be the first thing that you say to the next provincial government?
I'm going to say that we know what's going on in healthcare. We want to be involved. If you're going to make changes, involve us, consult us. We're the people providing the healthcare to Nova Scotians.
Heather Henderson, thank you very, very much for joining us. That was Heather Henderson, the president of the Nova Scotia Nurses Union. Back to you, Linda.
We are now going to New Glasgow, where Cynthia Kent is standing by. Cynthia.
Linda, I have Stephen Mont, the president of the Nova Scotia Tory Party, with me here now. Mr. Mont, what do you make of what's happening here today?
Well, I think it's a great night for the Conservative Party, Cynthia. People had counted us out throughout the campaign. We've come back with a great number of seats. There's only a few seats separating us from the Liberal Party right now. It's just a very exciting evening for us.
Now, what position does this put John Hamm in?
I think it puts John Hamm in an excellent position. He's going into the House with a large number of new members, and certainly we're hoping that it's going to narrow a bit more, but if things hold the way they are, he's going to be in a very commanding position in the new legislature.
Now, what party do you think he would be working with?
Well, I think you'll have to ask him those questions, but I think it's safe to say that we're going to be very influential in the next session of the legislature.
Now, is there one that your policies would be more that would dovetail better with than the other?
I really wouldn't want to say at this time. That'll be the things that we'll be looking at over the next couple of days.
Thank you very much. Linda, back to you.
This is a very exciting night of politics here in Nova Scotia. You can see by our mini board, the Liberals leading or elected in 20, the NDP right behind at 18, the Progressive Conservatives at 14, and I wonder, what must our political panel think of this? Mary Jane.
I think we're wondering where the popcorn is, because we're having such a great time sitting here watching TV. Parker, you said everybody sort of wins in this so far. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there's something to that. The Liberals win because if those numbers hold up, they will form the government. It'll be a shaky government. It'll be a government that has to be very adroit in how it handles its relations with the other two parties, perhaps doing some things with the support of the NDP and some things with the support of the PCs. The NDP have to be ecstatic, going from 4 seats, the most they ever held, to 18 seats, more than quadrupling the number of seats they held, and making a few inroads in the rural mainland, creaming the Liberals and the Tories in Metro. And the PCs, you know, it's not exactly oblivion when you're 6 seats behind the government.
Yeah.
So, they're in a I don't know if I think I envy them being in a kingmaker position, because I think there's maybe more balance than power in that balance of power role.
Exactly. Harry, what's your take so far?
Assuming for the moment that the Liberals do hold power, it's going to be a very, very different looking government. Bruce Holland has gone down, Eleanor Norrie's gone down, Jerry O'Malley's gone down, Alan Mitchell has, and Alistair Surratt, and who knows, there still may be 1 or 2 cabinet ministers to go. We've had as many as, 18, 19, 20 cabinet ministers, assuming they don't put any opposition in. Maybe for the first time in our history, we'll have nothing but a legislature of nothing but cabinet ministers.
That's a possibility too. There are a lot of former people there.
That's true, yeah.
I might also say that if those numbers, 20 Liberals, 18 NDP, and 14 Conservatives hold, Parker will have done what I did in '93.
Predicted it properly.
Right to the seat, because that was Parker's prediction, and we have it on tape, not now, but that was it, 20, 18, and 14. Good luck.
Well, thank you, Harry.
I know it hurts you to say that, Harry.
Not in the least. It does show that one or the other of us is perfect.
That's right. If you listen to us, one of us is going to be right.
All right, well, we will be back, but now let's go back to some more results with Linda.
We're going to take a look now at how the vote is shaping up province-wide. A look at the standings right now across Nova Scotia. The Liberals elected in 15, leading in 5. This is with all 52 ridings reporting. They right now have a total of 20. Right behind them, the NDP elected in 16. 18 for a total leading elected, and the Progressive Conservatives at 14. A huge night for the NDP.
It is, and there's a couple of ridings where the Liberals are leading by very small margins, and that's going to tell the tale tonight. It's going to come right down to the wire.
Let's see how the vote has changed. The Liberals with 36% of the vote, but that signifies a drop of almost 14 percentage points from the last election. The NDP, you can see where it went, picking up almost 14.5 percentage points, and the Progressive Conservatives
There's almost a straight transfer there, it looks like, from Liberals to NDP. But in other areas, it's different. If you look at Metro, all those Liberal seats that were lost, they only lost 7% of the vote in Metro from their last outing in Metro. So the NDP picked up 7 from the Liberals, picked up 7 from the Conservatives, and that's what made the difference.
What a night. We're going now to hear from Bruce Rainey, who's standing by at Dalhousie University. Bruce.
Thank you, Linda. About 40 Dalhousie students here at the Student Union building. They are into this tonight. How many of you actually voted today? See, it's a big number. And they are watching a minority government shape up, and we're joined by Cindy, Rob, and Bridget to talk about what a minority government would mean to students at Dalhousie. And Cindy, what do you think about this?
I don't think it's necessarily going to be a bad thing. I think that a minority government would force representatives to be more responsive to their constituents' wants. And I think that it's more important to have quality legislation than to have it pushed forward very fastly.
All right, Rob, I know that you kind of raised an eyebrow. You kind of disagree.
I do disagree. In fact, I think Nova Scotia is at a time and a juncture where we need strong leadership, and I don't think that a minority government is going to be able to provide that for us.
All right, Bridget, you're with the Student Union here at Dalhousie. What do you think about a possible minority government?
Well, I basically don't think that a heck of a lot is going to get accomplished in the next 4 years. I think that a lot of little things will happen, but in the big picture, not a lot is going to happen.
Okay, so you see the potential pros and cons of this, and we want to thank all the students for coming out tonight. About 2,000 actually voted today at Dalhousie, a big number and a potential swing vote there. Linda, back to you.
Thank you, Bruce. We're going to have a look now at incumbents who are either trailing or have lost their seats, and we're going to begin in the riding of Preston, where Wayne Adams is trailing at this point, 90 votes behind Yvonne Atwell, the NDP candidate, with 13 of 20 polls reporting Wayne Adams is fighting for his seat. Elsewhere, Chester St. Margaret's Fisheries Minister Jim Barkhouse in trouble at this point. Heinrich Bitter-Suermann leading by almost 155 votes. He's a transplant surgeon, and he's currently leading the march in Chester St. Margaret's. We move elsewhere now to Timberley Prospect, where Bruce Holland, Minister of Science and Technology, has lost his seat. Bill Estabrooks
the NDP.
Picks it up. The NDP pick it up. We move now to Yarmouth, where John DeVoe has picked up the seat. Richie Hubbard is gone.
And that's going to be one of the biggest surprises of the night. For the NDP to make that kind of a breakthrough in southwest Nova Scotia is a big surprise.
Incredible.
Well, we're waiting for this Halifax Citadel race to resolve itself, as well as the Guysborough-Port Hawkesbury, and really that's what we're waiting on. And Citadel is getting closer, it appears, as the night goes on.
There it is, 65 votes separating the two. Ed Kinley picked up the seat in the November by-election. Peter Delafis was right behind him then, and he's right behind him now. Only 21 of 95 polls reporting, so still waiting
and waiting. It's gone from a 133 vote lead to a 66 vote lead, or 65 vote lead. So
inching along.
This is is the riding that's going to determine the evening.
Back to Preston. Wayne Adams trailing by 90 votes. Yvonne Atwell holding on to her lead. 13 of 20 polls reporting. Guysborough, Port Hawkesbury. How's Ray White doing? There he is. Still has a slim margin of 37 votes. 30 of 72 polls reporting. A long way to go. Yes, a long way to go yet. Pictou West. Charlie Parker leading by 22. Luke Young right behind him, the Progressive Conservative candidate, and the Liberal candidate trailing at this point.
And that is another breakthrough for the NDP. If they're able to hold on to Pictou West, I mean, they never got more than 5 or 7% of the vote in Pictou West previously. It was strong Tory riding. For the NDP to make a breakthrough there, it was funny, as I was driving up to Halifax and Manigonish, I saw all these Charlie Parker signs along the highway. What's going on in Pictou West? There was a lot of NDP signs out.
Now we know what's going on there. We go now to the NDP headquarters where Laurie Graham is waiting. Laurie.
Hello, Linda. The excitement, as I say to you every time you come by, it continues to mount here. I'm joined with Eileen O'Connell, NDP MLA, re-elected for Halifax Fairview. Eileen, what do you make of this?
Well, I mean, we can hardly be disappointed with results like this tonight. We're absolutely thrilled. But I think it reflects the true frustration of Nova Scotians with old-style politics in this province. So while we're absolutely ecstatic with the results so far and with whatever outcome occurs, we know there's a big job to do ahead of us.
It's a very close race, and at this point nothing has been called. It certainly looks as though it will be minority. What's going to happen? I mean, depending on whether it goes Liberal or NDP, what will happen for you?
Well, I wouldn't presume to judge, A, the outcome, and B, how we deal with it, because I think there's going to be a great deal of work that has to be done in the next few days or a week. I mean, we're going from a caucus of 4 to how many? We don't even have a boardroom big enough to have a caucus meeting.
What will that be like for you? You've been in the legislature where you've only been so few members. Now you're going to have such a crowd in there at this point. What's that going to be like?
Well, I'd be delighted to have the company. I'm not the least bit disappointed to have lots and lots of new Democrats in there, and I don't think Nova Scotians will be disappointed either to have us there.
So you're not making any predictions here this evening?
Oh, I'm not making any predictions at all. And as I say, whatever the outcome, we'll do our very best as a party and a caucus to work with it to the benefit of Nova Scotians.
Thank you very much, and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Back to you, Linda.
And there you see a lovely exterior on this lovely night, a night of excitement in Nova Scotia politics. And there is Province House, and we're inside, and what a night we're having here. We are now going to take a look, another lovely nighttime shot of the skyline. We're now going to take a look at Liberal cabinet ministers who have been defeated. Alan Mitchell, defeated. The Justice Minister is out. Darrell Dexter has picked up that seat for the NDP. Halifax Needham, Gerald O'Malley, Labour Minister, is gone. He will not be back. Maureen MacDonald picks up that seat. Elsewhere, Timberley Prospect, Bruce Holland will not be back. He has lost to Bill Estabrooks, who picked up the seat. It was a close race, though, 41 of 46 before we called it. We all now go on to Argyll. Alistair Surratt, Minister of Human Resources, has lost to former Buchanan Cabinet Minister Neil LeBlanc.
And those two Acadian ridings, Argyll and Clare, they do flip back and forth between the Liberals and the Conservatives, and they've split it again, one Liberal and one Conservative in those two ridings. But we're waiting for those two key ridings now. In Citadel, the last report I had, there was only 10 votes. There were 65 votes separating the candidates. In Guysborough, Port Hawkesbury, 10 votes separating the two leading candidates. And the Liberals are just holding on by the skin of their teeth. I imagine there's a few Liberal prayers being said at the moment.
Some nails being bitten. We have another result board for you. This one from Sackville-Cobequid. John Hamm is back. Interim leader of the NDP. Repeat MLA. We have one more. Jim, here's Halifax Citadel. The lead is now 38 votes. Very, very close. 24 of 95 polls reporting. We are waiting for more. Tara Erskine now at 500. And there's Guysborough. Ray White's lead is now just 10. Too close to call.
And lots of polls.
still to report.
Of course, if the Liberals lose both of those, they drop to 18, and the NDP then is in the lead, and that changes the whole scenario. What happens then? This is a great evening for political scientists.
We shall see what happens. We go now to Claire McKenzie, who is standing by. Hello, Claire.
Hi, Linda. Thanks. I'm joined now by Peter O'Brien, the Vice President of the Atlantic Region of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Mr. O'Brien, your organization represents about 4,000 businesses right across Nova Scotia. What have been their major concerns throughout this election?
I think the biggest issue from our perspective is the total debt. The debt in this province over $9 billion. We want to see some stability, even if there's a minority government. I think that's going to be very important. The cost of municipal taxation has been rising steadily. Some of the occupational health and safety issues have been pushed in a way that has not been educational. It's been too regulatory in the way it's been done. But I think what we really need is to see some real leadership from the three parties, because it looks as if whatever happens now, no one's going to have a majority. And if we don't have that stability, we could have a very difficult period in this province.
Mm-hmm. So you're not worried about that if it's not a majority government? It does look like it's going to be a minority.
I think it is a minority government, and I think what has to happen now is that the three parties have to commit to work together for a period of time. I think any party that would force an election quickly would probably feel the wrath of a lot of people in this province.
How do you feel about the huge increase we've seen tonight in support for the NDP? I know that in the past, sometimes in elections, some businesses have come down hard on the NDP.
Well, I think that's true, and I think that what we would hope, quite frankly, in this province is that Mr. Chisholm looks to Saskatchewan and Mr. Romano, who has a government that has done very, very well, rather than look at the former Ray government, Ontario, because that was one that really was anti-business. And it's up to them to make that choice.
Thank you very much for joining us. Peter O'Brien is the Vice President of the Atlantic Region of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Back to you, Linda.
We now have about 45 candidates elected. The tension builds here tonight. We are now going to see Paul Withers, who's standing by at Liberal headquarters. Paul.
Thank you very much, Linda. Joined by Glenn McDougall, coordinator of the Liberals' Cape Breton campaign. Not so bad news on the island, although perhaps you needed more than 7 seats if you had any hope of moving beyond where you are now.
Yeah, well, I agree. The results on Cape Breton for the Liberals and for Russell MacLellan in particular, our Premier, I think are very encouraging. Certainly we would have liked to have swept the island as we did in 1993, but maybe that was being a little bit too optimistic. But overall, we're very happy with the results here.
Glenn, what do you think went wrong in the campaign?
Well, I think it's difficult at this point in time to start saying this didn't work, that didn't work. My primary focus, of course, was on the seats here in Cape Breton, and I think Cape Bretoners showed that they supported the policies of the Liberal Party, and in particular, they supported the type of leadership that Russell MacLellan brought to this party in July of 1997 when he became leader.
Senior strategists such as yourself, of course, always make a plan for different scenarios. We are now in a minority government scenario in Nova Scotia. It may well be a Liberal minority government. If it is, where does Russell MacLellan go to stay in power?
Well, I'm not certain if I can answer that question. I think that's a question that you're going to ask of the Premier when he arrives. He probably, I think the message that I heard from Russell throughout the campaign was that he was projecting a majority government. No doubt, Russell probably gave some thought to what would happen if there was a minority government. I think he's astute enough to cover all angles. But I certainly, at this point in time, can't project or can't, prophesy what Russell would do at this point in time. He's going to take a lot of advice. That's the normal style of Russell MacLellan. He's not one that's quick to make a decision. He'll want to hear from various elements within the party, and I then think he will make what is the best decision for the people of the province of Nova Scotia.
McDougall, thank you very much. We'll throw it back to you, Linda, in Halifax.
You may notice our mini board has just changed. The Liberals now at 19, the NDP tied 19, Progressive Conservatives at 14. Let's take a look at what is happening province-wide, and there you see it. Liberals elected in 17, leading in 2 for 19. NDP 18 elected, 1 leading, 19.
We were waiting for Citadel for something else to happen there, and Citadel has slipped over to the NDP at this point, and that accounts for the 1919.
The scales hang in the balance. We look now at the share of vote, and my goodness, how close is that?
Incredible split in the vote. The province is almost evenly divided between three parties, but certainly the NDP and the Liberals are almost dead even in terms of their popular support.
And there you see an independent candidate polling in as well at the bottom. That's the other line you see. We look now to the big race at Halifax Citadel, where there it is. Peter Delafus has taken over the lead, a lead of 75 votes. We're now at 33 of 95 polls reporting.
A third of the polls reporting there, so we still have a long evening ahead of us waiting for these results to come in from Halifax Citadel.
As they seesaw back and forth in Citadel, what's happening in Guysborough?
They seem stuck there at that 10-vote spread, and that also is important for the Liberals. Even if they happen to lose Citadel, they could still be in a tie with the NDP and form a government. If it slips over and they lose this one as well, then it puts a big question mark on the outcome of this election.
We are now going to join Halifax Chronicle-Herald cartoonist Bruce McKinnon for his unique perspective on this election. Bruce McKinnon, what do you think of what you've seen so far tonight?
Well, I don't know any more about who's going to win than I knew when the coverage started at 7, Linda. I think it's going to be a really tough race, and for the average cartoonist, this is International Cover Your Butt Day. I mean, you really you don't know what to do, so you have to come up with a number of different scenarios to try to cover all the angles.
So what are you doing, Bruce?
Well, my first cartoon that goes out to the province, see, the way the paper works is the provincial edition has to go out first, and the normal press time for that is about 9 o'clock. They have to get the trucks up to Sydney and down to Yarmouth, and so we know we're not going to know the answer to this election by the time those trucks leave. So I had to come up with a cartoon that would stand up no matter what the results were, and I have a copy of it. The actual cartoon is up in imaging.
I'd love to see it if you can let us have a look at it.
Yeah, it's up in imaging right now, but this is a copy of it. It's basically it's an Oscar tying into last night's events. Russell MacLellan, Robert Chisholm, and John Hamm, best lead roles in a disaster epic, Election '98. So that I figure takes care of me for the initial part of the campaign, or the initial part of the evening. By the time we know something, I have a couple of other cartoons I've been working on that will hopefully take care of the other scenarios.
Well, you've covered yourself well. Bruce McKinnon, thanks so much. Perhaps we'll hear from you again before the end of the evening.
Okay, thanks, Linda.
And that change reflects Citadel slipping back again towards the Liberals, so I think we're going to see a bit of a seesaw here tonight.
Here is Halifax Citadel, and there it is. Speaking of seesaw, 6 votes separating the two. Talk about a nail-biter. Rob Gordon is standing by now. Rob.
Linda, I'm here with John Young, past president of the Liberal Party of Nova Scotia. John Young, what's happening here tonight?
Well, everybody said it was a three-way race, and I guess that's exactly what it is.
Did you buy that at the time?
I thought it was more of a two-way race than a three-way race, and I think the popular vote shows that. The Liberals at the moment are around 36% of the popular vote, the NDP 34%, then the Conservatives just slightly under 30%.
What's going to happen to the Liberal Party?
Well, at the moment, it's still leading in popular vote and leading in seats, so I think we may have a long night, maybe even a long week before all of this sorts itself out.
There's no question it's a minority government. Can you get in bed with the Tories or the NDP to run a government?
Well, I don't know, because this is a little premature at this point, but you know, we have a history in this country of making minority governments work. I can recall federally in 1972, and I think it was 109 Liberals and 107 Conservatives, with the NDP holding the balance.
What about this province in this time? Who would make the best mate for the Liberal Party?
I think you better ask the mates if they'd like to be a mate.
Any overtures yet? Any thought of that? Any talk?
Well, I don't know, but because I'm not involved in that, but I assume that after the thing settles down, all of the various parties and their respective leaders are going to have to consider very carefully where they are, because the one thing that does have to happen as a result of this vote is that the political parties, whether they like the results or not, and in fact it makes it very difficult to govern in absolute numbers, but the political parties have to make the system work, because this is what the electorate has delivered, and you have to respect that. And
how long can a government last working with another party?
Oh, it can last a long time. That's happened many times before, or it can last a very short time. In circumstances.
What do you think in this case? You've watched the campaign.
I don't think Nova Scotians want another election next week or next month, so I expect they would go for some time regardless of how this ends up. But I think it's all political parties are obligated to try to make this work somehow or other. It is different. It is interesting.
Linda, that's it. You've heard from the past president of the Liberal Party. Things are still up in the air. Things are up in the air probably for the next few days. Over to you.
48 candidates now elected and still too soon to call. We go now to the political panel to see what they have to say. Mary Jane.
Thank you, Linda. One of the longest nights. We're still frantically looking into the crystal ball now, trying to figure out what are some of the scenarios that might happen. Now, Parker, what are you thinking?
Well, the only of the 4 or 5 remaining seats in question, there's only one where the NDP have a shot at winning them. So the best the NDP can now do is 19-19-14.
Right.
In that scenario, the Liberals will face the House. So what I'm essentially saying here before the CBC election desk is prepared to do so is that we're going to have a Liberal minority government. At least they're going to try for it.
Now, you said that we heard Eileen O'Connell say that the NDP doesn't even have a boardroom big enough to face a caucus that big.
She's going to find one.
The NDP may very well be better off almost winning government than winning government because they have an awful lot of inexperienced people there. That was a big part of the problem that Bob Rae ran into. They have some candidates, frankly, whom they've likely had to sit on during this election campaign. They may be happy that it's March and it's not a growing season.
That's my line.
Terry?
Well, somebody mentioned earlier the possibility of a coalition government. That is not in the works.
Not going to happen.
It's not going to happen, and I think you can go to the bank on that one. Since we last talked, I noticed that we had 5 cabinet ministers defeated. Now we have 2 more. Wayne Adams, which I think is a great upset, and Jim Barkhouse, which is an upset but not a startling one. The Liberals have been decimated, and yet they may hold on to wealth.
Now, the share of the vote, it was really close. The last time we saw, I think it was 35.2% for the Liberals, 34.6% for the NDP. How is that share, percentage-wise, going to play an important role?
I don't think it will at all, but it's interesting because Parker's always pumping the idea of proportional representation. Finally, he is.
We have a proportional representation result here.
On a first-past-the-post system, we have proportional representation.
We have a proportional result. The way it could work out is if you had a situation where the Liberals were 1 or 2 seats behind, or where you had the Tories in the NDP, it could be one of the factors the Lieutenant Governor could weigh in deciding who to ask to form a government. But the Lieutenant Governor doesn't enter into it as long as the Liberals have the most seats, or even tied for the most seats.
Also, too, the Liberals, I think it's pretty well agreed when they're going to be within maybe 2, maybe down 1, who knows. But they do have the right to go before the House, and the Lieutenant Governor does not have the right to ask her. Now, if the Liberals, let's say, went down to 10 seats, and the others were still short of a majority, I think that the governor, and I think the Liberals themselves would be smart enough to say, we have been repudiated and we are going.
I don't think we have to deal with that.
I don't think Russell
tonight.
would have this. That's right.
Yeah.
No, I think they would have lost any moral right.
Okay, we'll continue this off camera, but now let's go back to Linda.
Speaking of too close, the riding of Pictou West went to Charlie Parker, the NDP candidate, but his lead was only 34 votes and could be a recount, we're told.
Yeah, certainly. When it's that close, I wouldn't be surprised.
And Luke Young polling second, and he is young, in his 20s, as a matter of fact.
But again, that was such a strong Conservative riding, and Luke Young, although he's young, he's a very good candidate, very sharp young guy. So I think the Conservatives really hope to have that riding come back to them. The NDP has made a breakthrough there. That riding is the riding that the Michelin plant is in at Granton, and they always wanted to try to make a breakthrough in that area wherever there was a large unionized workforce, or in this case not unionized, but trying to unionize them. And I think they they would be very happy with this.
The
Flipped
tug
again.
of war continues in Halifax Citadel, now up to 56 of 95 polls reporting. Peter Delafiss holding the lead at this point. It has seesawed back and forth throughout the evening. There you see it, Halifax Citadel, a battleground right now. We'll be watching it very carefully as it tugs back and forth. We are now going to join Bruce Rainey, who is at the Students' Union building at Dalhousie. Bruce.
Linda, every time you flash that Halifax Citadel board, there are boos and yays here amongst the Dalhousie students. That's because they made up a lot of that vote today. Chris Adams is the president of the Student Union here at Dalhousie. Chris, Get Out and Vote was a campaign you ran.
Yeah, it's something that we've been building up to for the last little while. Today we had 4 trucks driving around, picking up students, taking them to the polling booths, getting them enumerated. As well, we've been putting literature out for the past little while, and we had a phone line set upstairs where we had probably close to 500 phone calls today inquiring about how to get out to vote for rides to come pick them up.
All right, now one of the drivers was our buddy Brian here. Brian, why do you think it was so important for Dalhousie students this year to get out and vote?
I think it was important for us to get out and vote because the issue of post-secondary education was ignored by all the parties largely, and we felt that if a lot of people showed up to vote, that the next time this process went through, the candidates would spend a little more time on campus and a lot more time on the issue.
Ted, this is a strange night for you folks because at 12 o'clock midnight tonight, your senior faculty could go on strike. Was that big when you made your decision?
I don't think anybody here really believes that the two facts aren't connected. It's really plain that the issue when it comes down to faculty negotiations is money, and the money's got to come from the government, and the students are concerned. The students are worried. They're seeing what they thought was promising several years of university spiraling down in the face of a faculty strike, and they're going out to vote to make themselves heard about that issue.
Brian, was there any one party that addressed that issue to your liking?
No.
Really?
Absolutely not. I was unsatisfied with all of their approaches. I think they all hedged their bets, and they've all shown a lack of leadership.
All right, I think a general feeling of unsatisfaction here at Dalhousie. We'll keep you up to date. Right now, Linda, back to you.
We are going to take a look now at where the remaining battlegrounds are in election 98. Here's one of them, Guysborough, Port Hawkesbury. The tug of war continues. 44 of 72 polls reporting Ray White, five-time mayor of Canso, hanging on to his 66-vote lead. We now go to another battleground, Annapolis, where Laurie Montgomery has a lead of only 134 votes. Right behind him, Basil Stewart. John Kinsella with a strong showing there as well. We go now to Lunenburg. Lila O'Connor still in a battle to hold that seat for the Liberals, but right now Michael Baker is leading by more than 185 votes, 60 of 66 polls. Back now to Halifax Citadel. Peter Delafiss, now a lead of 146, with 64 of 95 polls reporting.
And leads of 150 votes seem to be big leads at this point in the evening, especially when you're looking at Port Hawkesbury there when the lead is much closer. And the NDP clearly hurt the Liberals in a couple of those mainland ridings where their vote has come up considerably, and that's really helped them a lot.
We're going to hear now from some voters who were undecided, but now they've made up their mind and they're going to talk to Catherine Clark.
Linda, as I said before, we had 3 undecided voters who we asked to follow the election, mark their turning points, and tell us how they voted. And Ralph Meyer was one of those voters. He's a vegetable farmer from Kingston. So, Ralph, do share with us. How did you vote?
Well, I voted Liberal, but I must say I voted very reluctantly Liberal. I also felt the campaign was getting weaker and weaker, and the arguments in favor of voting Liberal was increasingly lacking.
So why? Why did you do it?
Well, it's a thank you vote for the work done in the last few years in reducing our budget deficits and in attempting healthcare and education reforms.
Now, I know you have some very specific concerns as a farmer in the Valley. Do you think that this new government can rectify any of those concerns for you?
Well, if we do have a majority government, we probably can address our vanishing resources in respect to agricultural land somewhat better than if we have a government that has to form a minority government. However, I feel land protection in Kings County is becoming an issue that all parties will take up.
So is a minority government something that you would like to see?
No, I would like to see actually a strong majority government, preferably Liberal, but really of any colour that could address these questions.
Well, thanks for hanging in there for the last 5 weeks for us and telling us how you voted. Linda, that was Ralph Meyer. Back to you.
You are looking at Province House on this lovely night, March 24th, a night that won't soon be forgotten in Nova Scotia political history. What a night it has been. We have the riding of Kings North now, where George Archibald elected with all the polls reporting. There you have it. He takes the seat once again for the Tories.
Another strong NDP showing there.
These are also candidates who have signed on to the anti-VLT gambling pledge. That was from Ian Call's People Against Casinos and Video Lottery Terminals. They challenged the candidates to sign on, and Gordon Balser was one of them. We go now to Cumberland North. Ernie Fage, elected and has signed on. Elsewhere, Annie Ganesh, Highland Fraser, has agreed to do what he can to limit casino gambling, video lottery gambling. Hants East, John McDonnell, he was the first one to actually sign the pledge when Ian Call first raised this as they wanted to make it a campaign issue. They did the best they could to do that. They challenged the candidates to sign on, and John McDonnell was the first one to put his name on the dotted line. It will be interesting to see how these candidates now handle this pledge that they've made.
It will be, yeah, especially given the circumstances they're going to be working within. Actually, I think it might actually help. I mean, these circumstances might help a single interest group like that, because so many issues will be make or break issues and gives them more leverage than they would have over a strong majority government. I have to take issue with what the fellow was saying earlier.
We have a look now at the standings. The Liberals elected in 17, leading in 2 for 19. The NDP elected in 18, a huge night for them, leading in 1. They're at 19 as well. The Progressive Conservatives at 14. Here's how the vote has changed from the last election. The Liberals, even though they hold 35% of the vote, they dropped almost 14 percentage points, and you can see where it went. The NDP picking them up. The Tories losing as well, almost just over 1 percentage point, a drop for them this time around. Guysborough, Port Hawkesbury, Ray White still in a battle there for his own seat. 138 votes is all that separates him from Ronnie Chisholm. A strong showing for the NDP candidate there.
He's opened his lead a little bit over the past little while. Still a lot of polls, but this could be the one to decide it.
Annapolis now, I believe. There it is, 51 of 54. Oh, we're getting very close now. 131 votes separating Laurie Montgomery from Basil Stewart, and John Kinsella picking up almost 2,000 votes down in Annapolis. And now back to Halifax Citadel. Peter Delafis leading by 135 votes. The incumbent, Ed Kinley, is trailing. He picked it up in the November by-elections, and they're still fighting for it. Lunenburg now. How is Lila O'Connor doing? Still trailing to Michael Baker. He has a lead of almost 190 votes. 60 of 66 polls. We're getting down to the wire now.
And again, poll or riding after riding, we're seeing that the NDP vote has risen from barely anything at all to a point where they're tied with the Conservatives or tied with the Liberals for second, and they determined the outcome in a lot of those ridings, because a lot of voters who didn't return the vote for the Liberals again, they went to the NDP rather than the Tories.
How did it happen? How do you think the NDP picked up so many seats this time around?
Well, I mean, clearly they did concentrate enough support in Metro and Cape Breton and then a few other ridings to be able to gather up all those seats. But I think what's even more encouraging, if that's possible for the NDP, is the fact that their vote has risen like the tide across the province, and they're competitive in ridings now where they were just not a presence before.
We are now going to catch up with Claire McKenzie. Claire.
Thanks, Linda. I'm now joined by Rick Clark, the president of the Nova Scotia Federation of Labour. That's a federation that represents about 70,000 workers right across Nova Scotia, and a federation that has been very active throughout this election campaign. Rick Clark, what have been the major concerns for your members throughout this campaign?
Well, I think it's clear the concerns that are, being reflected in the polls is that people were concerned what's happening to our health care, what's happening to the jobs and job losses, contrary to statistics that have been touted during the
campaign, we're seeing major drops in job opportunities for our young people. The government themselves, through the downsizing, have taken away opportunities. And education for our youth, and the cost of education, and the fact that our young people are coming out of universities with high personal loans and not able to get a job. And those are issues that we talked about throughout the campaign.
And in light of those issues, what do you make of the shakedown that we're seeing here tonight? We're looking at the NDP leading or elected in 19 seats here. What do you make of that? What do you account for that?
Well, I think it's very, again, reflective of part of the NDP's theme in this election was enough is enough. And I think people are saying that. I mean, I for one, am absolutely delighted to see what's happening, because I think we're going to at least see now that there's going to be a voice for people. There's going to be, the parties are going to have to work together. The NDP, when you look at the province vote, I mean, Cape Breton, Metro, Yarmouth, Hants, Pictou, I mean, and the popular vote across the province, there's certainly a provincial party.
Well, Rick Clark, thank you very much for joining us this evening here at Province House. That was Rick Clark I was speaking with, the president of the Nova Scotia Federation of Labour. Back to you, Linda.
We're going to take a look now at how the vote is breaking down on the South Shore. Oh, there's Chester St. Margaret's. Heinrich Bitter-Suurman, a transplant surgeon, a new face as a new MLA coming to town now to represent Chester St. Margaret's Bay. Jim Barkhouse defeated. We go elsewhere. Lunenburg, Lila O'Connor still battling it out with Michael Baker. A lead of 186 votes. 6 more polls to report.
And this is one of those ridings where the NDP was never a presence historically, and look at that NDP vote. That's really been an important factor in that campaign.
We now go to Lunenburg West. Don Down is back. He's the Minister of Transportation and Public Works. He has defeated Eric Hustvedt and Lou Senta. But again, all in the 2000s behind him. He has his comfortable election now. Up next, Queens, John Leaf. He's back, and he's been there for quite some time. John Leaf was elected in '78, and he's back again.
He's going for the quarter century.
We go now to Shelburne. Cliff Uskelson is back. You can tell us the story of
the dynasty.
Yes.
His father held that seat from 1970 up to 1993, and now son Cliff has taken over and has held the riding now twice.
And look at that. More than 2,000 votes for the NDP there.
Yeah, I mean, clearly this is the big story in this election. Well, the Liberals have been rebuked. I don't know how the Liberals can read this any other way as a rebuke to them. But the other big story here is the NDP, and it isn't, and a lot of people weren't predicting this, it isn't just an NDP vote in Metro and Cape Breton.
I believe I just saw Baker elected. Would that be correct? I believe it just went by. Michael Baker in Lunenburg. There it is.
There
Michael Baker elected. The seesaw battle is over. Lila O'Connor has lost.
One by one, we're checking them off here.
We're chipping away. Still waiting for some others, though. Halifax Citadel. Still waiting.
Guysborough, Port Hawkesbury.
Still waiting. And one more. That would be Annapolis. The tension builds.
The tension builds. We have a tie right now between the Liberals and the NDP, and those final ridings will determine whether or not the Liberals are going to slip down below the NDP or not. I don't think the NDP are a factor in the remaining ridings, but the Liberals could lose. The NDP actually is leading in one of those. Citadel. Sorry.
We shall wait and see what happens. We now go to Angie Johnson. Angie.
Hi, Linda. I'm with Liberal candidate Jerry O'Malley, who's just lost his seat in the Halifax-Needham riding. Mr. O'Malley, you've had this seat for about 8 years or more. Was this expected at all?
Well, was it expected? I didn't come in here with those expectations. I came in here to win.
What are your thoughts now?
My thoughts are that I had probably one of the most phenomenal teams ever in existence in politics, in my opinion. I owe them a great tribute, and the supporters, those who supported me in Needham over the last 20 years, as either an alderman or as an MLA, I owe a great tribute to them. It was an honor to serve those who supported me, and I pay tribute to them. But the people have spoken, and it's a democratic society.
What is the future for you in politics?
Oh, those questions are a little too early to answer at this point in time.
Great. Thank you very much. Back to you, Linda.
Labour Minister Jerry O'Malley loses tonight to NDP candidate Maureen MacDonald. She picks up the seat. What a night we have here.
Well, Citadel just flipped back again to the Liberals, Linda, and so we have 2018-14 again. But in each of those three ridings that are still left to be declared, we have 130 odd votes separating people, 45 in Citadel. So this is not going to be resolved until the end.
Kaisero Port Hawkesbury, Ray White, a lead of 138 votes. This is one of the other undecideds as we wait to see. Now inching up, 50 of 72 polls reporting. The other undecided we are waiting on. 51 of 54 polls reporting we are getting very, very close. A lead of just over 130 for Liberal candidate Laurie Montgomery. It was a Liberal seat. Will they hang on to it? We shall see. Once again, the Liberals now leading or elected in 20, the NDP in 18, the Progressive Conservatives in 14. Fascinating night here. We now go to Catherine Clark, who is standing by. Catherine.
Linda, I'm with Dr. Kim Crawford of the Medical Society of Nova Scotia, which represents Nova Scotia's doctors. Dr. Crawford, we've heard all the horror stories about lack of beds, doctors leaving south for the States, people waiting in emergency rooms. How will a minority government change what's happening to our healthcare system?
I think what healthcare has needed, as many other sectors have needed, is stability in the system. I think to some extent this election has created some uncertainty. All of the leaders of all the parties have stated that healthcare is an important issue for them, and one can only hope that they manage to work together to be able to stabilize our system.
What would be number one on your shopping list, on your wish list?
Certainly the stabilization of physician numbers and services in rural areas and also in metropolitan areas is a big issue. We also need stability in our hospitals and our hospital beds.
Well, how do you think that a minority government can deliver those to you?
Well, I can only hope that they all recognize that the people of Nova Scotia feel that this is an important issue and take the steps necessary to make the system work.
What do you mean about that uncertainty that you talked about?
Well, it's a little difficult when you have essentially two parties in a dead heat to get the degree of leadership that would point to a stable future for healthcare.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Linda, that was Dr. Kim Crawford of the Medical Society of Nova Scotia. Back to you.
And reporter Darrow McIntyre has been out and about tonight. Darrow.
I'm here in Dartmouth North with Liberal candidate Gloria McCluskey. Gloria, what happened tonight?
Well, I guess the orange tide was coming in. That's all I can say. We see it everywhere across the province, and it was just too much. But all I can say is don't cry for me, Argentina, because I'm off to the golf course for the summer.
You are seeing pictures of the exterior of John Hamm's campaign headquarters. John Hamm is arriving. They're trying to clear a way for him. As you can see, they're clearing a path.
Here he is right now, coming up.
John Hamm, who won his seat. We'll be hearing from him no doubt shortly as he comes to greet his supporters in New Glasgow. We will wait to see him when he comes into his headquarters. He's won his seat. Party's made some gains. Big night for him.
3 seats yet to be declared. The Liberals are leading in all 3, so they could slip down to a tie with the NDP or even lose more than that, but at the moment they're holding the lead in all 3 of those seats. Whatever happens with those 3 seats, I think what we're looking at is a minority government, and I think the Liberals will, no matter what happens, will attempt to meet the legislature as the government.
Now, we just caught a glimpse of John Hamm's headquarters. Now, what do you think about John Hamm and what he must be thinking tonight?
I think John Hamm must be pleased. I mean, after all, the Tories came into this race in a clear 3rd spot. They were under threat of losing their electoral base in this province.
And there he is, John Hamm at his headquarters.
Statement in a couple of minutes, but we're going to look at issues. Thank you.
Have you been talking to anybody on the phone tonight?
I had a congratulatory call from Robert Chisholm, but it was purely that. Purely that. I did. I had a congratulatory call from Roseanne. Congratulations.
Have you spoken to? You said you spoke to Mr. Chisholm. What did you say?
I said congratulations and said that he ran a good campaign and he should be very pleased with the way his workers work for him.
So what are you going to do now?
I'm going to greet my workers.
What do you do tomorrow then? What's your future? What's your political future?
Well, it's hardly the night to be thinking about that.
The CBC Decision Desk projects that the Liberals will be able to form a minority government after this, the 1988 Nova Scotia election. 58-year-old Russell MacLellan will begin his second term as Premier only 8 months after succeeding John Savage. MacLellan continues as the 31st Premier of the government. We make the call 2 hours and 32 minutes into the show.
How many elections has
nothing like the last time. MacLellan continues as the 31st Premier of the province. MacLellan took over as the head of the Liberal Leader Party, the head of the Liberal Party after winning a leadership convention last July, and then in November he was elected to the legislature in a by-election in Cape Breton North. It was MacLellan's first experience in provincial politics after 18 years as the MP for Cape Breton, the Sydneys, and Ottawa. There you have it. Minority government.
The worst that the Liberals can do is end up with a tie with the NDP because their lead is stretched in 2 of those 3 remaining constituencies. That's why we're making that call at this point.
Well, let's take a look at some of the numbers and why it is we were able to make the call. There you see, with all 52 ridings reported, the Liberals elected in 18, leading in 2. They are now at 20. The NDP elected in 18, the Progressive Conservatives at 14. But that's one of the other factors in the call. We'll get back to that, but first we'll take a look at how the vote is changing, as I mentioned, and this is how this all helps the decision desk when they make their call. Jim, you can walk us through that one.
Sure. I mean, what we see here is almost unprecedented 3-way split in the vote. I can't recall any provincial election that ended up with these kinds of figures. Not only a 3-way split in the vote, but a 3-way split that produced an almost equal number of seats proportional to the vote. This is very unusual in our system of government.
We are now going to hear from John Hamm, who's standing by.
Well, we might not have won, but we certainly didn't lose. At the start of this campaign, the pundits were saying we weren't even in it. Well, we proved them wrong, and we have come out of this stronger. And we did it because we had a simple, solid message and a realistic plan that said we would put people first. And we did it because we had a fantastic team of candidates and volunteers from one end of this province to the other who believed in our message, who believed in our party, and who gave everything they had to our effort. To the people of Pictou Centre, a huge thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for your vote of confidence. I promise to do my level best to prove to you that your confidence has been well placed. And a special thank you to all my Pictou Centre campaign team and to all of the volunteers who worked so hard and did such a fantastic job while I spent so much of the last 39 days out of the constituency. And I've often said that elections are won or lost on the ground, at the local level. You did the groundwork and paved the way for our win here this evening, and I do thank you, thank you. To everyone who participated on the provincial campaign team and who gave so much over the last 2 years, take pride in tonight's result. We ran a first-rate issue-driven, clean campaign focusing on issues that are of concern to all Nova Scotians. And we are a stronger party for it. My local opponents, Roseanne Skoke and Judy Hughes, let me say, and I do mean it sincerely, every single person who puts their name on a ballot and offers to serve their constituency in their province walks away a winner. As is the case with almost any victory, there's always a measure of disappointment as good people, talented people who have the best interests of their constituents and community at heart are unsuccessful in their efforts. It saddens me tonight that Alfie MacLeod will not be with our caucus when we reconvene, because Alfie has worked so hard on behalf of his constituents and the people of Cape Breton. And for those individuals who interrupted their personal and business lives to stand for our party, and for whom the results are a personal disappointment, I want to express my deep appreciation and the deep appreciation of the party. Of course, the biggest thank you that I have saved for my biggest supporter, my best friend, and the love of my life, having said that, I'll have to tell you, it is Janesta. I wouldn't be standing here this evening if it wasn't for the tremendous help and support that she has given me, and if it wasn't for all the support that I've received from our three children, Jennifer, John, and Jeffrey. The results of the election are no doubt bittersweet for Premier MacLellan, who won his own seat with a sizable majority. Having known Russell for many years, I know that the overall results are obviously a big disappointment for him and his party, but the Premier, who has celebrated a lot more political victories than defeats, knows perhaps better than most that politics is never predictable and can often be disappointing. Russell took over his party at a very difficult time, giving Liberals across Nova Scotia renewed enthusiasm. He was largely responsible for bringing Liberals back to the fold and for making this election a three-party contest, something that many didn't think possible just a little over a year ago. And let me also finally congratulate Robert Chisholm and the New Democratic Party for what for them is a tremendous victory, a victory for both Robert and his party. And the dynamics of the new legislature will bring challenges. Each of the three parties has an obligation to put the best interests of the people of Nova Scotia first. That is what people expect, and that is what I am determined to see happen. I have always said that people must come before politics. It is a commitment that I pledge will be demonstrated in the way in which my party responds to the agenda of the new government. Thank you.
Government with either the Liberals or the NDP?
I haven't given any thought to that. The results are really too new for all of us perhaps to digest, but I think perhaps what we'll be looking at is an issue-by-issue kind of support for whatever it is the government brings forward.
That sounds like you're ruling out a coalition government and you will decide as you go along. Is that the case?
That would be my reaction tonight, yes.
Are you disappointed, sir, because you lost the status of the official opposition?
Sure, I don't. I'm a very competitive person, and no one likes to finish third, but on the other hand, I see a lot of positives in what happened here tonight for the Conservative Party.
What did you see positive?
I see positives because If you look perhaps back 3 months ago, it was predicted that our party would simply disintegrate when the election was called, and we didn't do that. We now find ourselves in a very strong position. We've increased the number of members that we have, so in reality, we have come forward.
How much power does that give you? It seems to me that you have the balance in your hands to decide whether or not you're going to support whoever does eventually form this government.
We certainly have a lot more power in the upcoming session of the legislature than we had as the opposition party. So yes, we're in a much better position than we were.
Will you be looking to work with the government to keep a government going, or are we going to see another election?
He was greeted by supporters at his headquarters in Stellarton, answering questions from reporters on this turn of events tonight. You're looking at Province House on this lovely night, now inside Province House. Jim, walk us through it. What does this mean?
What does it mean? At the moment, it means a Liberal minority government. Whatever happens in Citadel, which is really the last constituency to be declared, even if it's a 19-19 tie in terms of seats after Citadel reports, it'll still be a Liberal minority government. They have the right to meet the legislature as the government and attempt to get the support of one of the other two parties to carry on. So it will be a Liberal minority government, at least initially.
John Hamm saying he would look at it on an issue-by-issue basis. Does that surprise you?
That doesn't surprise me. Our tradition is one-party government. It would be highly unusual to see a formal coalition between two of the parties, and so that doesn't surprise me. That's usually the way minority government works in Canada.
Now, some people might be concerned, they hear the word minority government and think of instability. Is that necessarily so?
Not necessarily. We've had some very good minority governments in Canadian history, and minority governments that have lasted 2.5, 3 years, and we've had some very progressive legislation at those times. What it does do is it creates the need for new patterns of cooperation between the parties.
Very interesting. Some interesting days ahead. I suppose issue-by-issue basis then does give them some considerable clout then perhaps in this.
It does. It gives each of the opposition parties considerable clout. It forces the government to be much more sensitive to what their issues are. Some Nova Scotians might be very pleased with that kind of government.
We're going to take a look now. I believe we're heading to NDP headquarters, and you can see the NDP electing, or introducing, I should say, their new caucus. There you see Howard Epstein up on stage. Maureen MacDonald as well. Very happy at their wins tonight, and Eileen O'Connell.
Gary asked me if I would say a few words, and I said I'd be delighted.
Delighted, I should say so.
This is certainly reminiscent, isn't it, of the federal election just 9 months ago. The same kind of NDP surge that has brought them to a status that they've never had in Nova Scotia politics. And I think that they must be feeling ebullient tonight.
An update now on those ridings that are so very close. And there you see it, Ray White taking Guysborough, Port Hawkesbury. It was a close battle with Ronnie Chisholm. We go now to Halifax Citadel. This was another tug-of-war all evening. Ed Kinley leading right now by 180 votes. 2 polls remaining. 2 polls remaining. We go now to the library where Harry and Parker are standing by with Mary Jane. Mary Jane.
Well, 2 hours and 32 minutes it took. Parker thought he had a little earlier. What did you think? Now we have a Liberal minority. John Hamm says he's in a powerful position. What do you think?
Well, that was a very gracious speech by John Hamm, and I think what you saw there was a good example of the political skills that he does have that I don't think Nova Scotians or even pundits were quick to pick up on. A little bit of that genteel, Stanfield-esque, very polite, very courtly, he does have more power. He also has, as I said before, a lot of balance. I was struck by the fact, and perhaps it was a slip of the tongue, but he implied that Chisholm had called him. In fact, he said that twice. If so, that may mean that Chisholm, anticipating a possible 19-19 split, or even the way it is now, thinking that maybe the Tories would decide to support him.
Parker,
strangely enough, we have a House divided as never before, but I think maybe Dr. Hamm set the tone for what may go on. Now, Dr. Hamm is a much more soft-spoken man than Robert Chisholm, But if the Tories indicate that they are going to be cooperative, that they're going to cooperate on making good legislation, then it seems to me that the NDP and Chisholm are going to have to soften their stridency down a bit.
Yes.
And what we may see is a House that actually works together.
A polite legislature.
A polite legislature.
So how will
Proportional representation isn't half bad.
Oh, yes. Leaders first past the post.
How will that trickle down to the students, for example, that Bruce was talking to, and the people that are hoping to bring their issues forward?
Well, I think that the students, pretty much all three parties, said that they're not going to permit tuition increases. Now, whether you get a rollback or not, I don't know. The most interesting initial issue, it seems to me, is that the NDP and the Tories, one of the very few solid spending promises, and the only one by the NDP, was on BST relief.
That's right.
Because there's very little difference between the Tories and the NDP. If they insist on putting through BST relief, will the Liberals have to go along with it? And that would be an indication on that one issue of how the opposition can actually make things happen.
Quick word, Parker.
Okay, also on the, as they pointed out, on the gambling issue, you know, those Ian Call looks like a pretty big winner tonight in that he's got a half a dozen candidates who pledged to do something about it. Well, half a dozen candidates could make a difference here.
Well, they'll have to be guided by their caucus, I think. I'm not looking at gambling as being an issue that might bring the government down.
Well, we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but now let's go back to Linda.
Well, we're going to have a look now at how many women candidates, see how some of them are doing. Yvonne Atwell, elected in Preston, defeating Cabinet Minister. These are all women who have been elected. She defeats Cabinet Minister Wayne Adams. We go now to Bedford Fall River, where Francine Cosman has held her seat. She has been re-elected. Peter Christie defeated. Marvin Silver defeated. Elsewhere, and there we see Rosemary Godden elected. She takes that seat from Bill McDonald. It was a Liberal seat, not anymore. Rosemary takes the seat. And Cape Breton-the-Lakes, where Helen MacDonald has won her seat once again. She held it coming in. That was Bernie Boudreau's seat. And once he stepped down, Helen MacDonald won it in a by-election, and she wins it again. Another MacDonald now, Maureen MacDonald in Halifax Needham. She is elected and she defeats a cabinet minister, Labour Minister Gerald O'Malley, defeated by Maureen MacDonald. So
well, that's
women coming back to
that's good. That's good to see. I noticed that I think five of the 6 women elected to the legislature from the NDP. The NDP, 1/3 of their candidates were women, whereas the Liberals only had 8, and I think the Tories 4, something like that. So it does kind of change the gender composition of the House a bit. Not enough, but there is some improvement there, and the NDP has contributed to that tonight.
Well, something else they'll be proud of tonight, I'm sure. We are now going to join Claire McKenzie. Claire.
Thanks, Linda. I'm joined now by Sandra Himmelman of the Nova Scotia Federation of Home and Schools Association, an organization that is deeply concerned with the state of education right across this province. Sandra Himmelman, first, thank you very much for driving in from La Have to join us tonight.
Pleased to be here. Thank you.
What do you make of what's happened here tonight, what we've seen?
I think that the people of Nova Scotia have actually said to the government, we need to be listened to. We need to be heard. And so now with a minority government, they will listen.
Education has been such a major issue throughout this election campaign. What have been the main concerns for your federation?
I think that we're concerned with the classroom, what's happening inside the classroom. The lack of funding in Nova Scotia for education has been terrible, and we need to be able to give the priority of this government to education.
So what do you want the Liberal minority government to do about it? What will be the first thing you ask them to do?
I think we need some more money into education. I think Nova Scotia is one of the lowest provinces per student for education funding, and I think that the priority has to be shown right now, because if education is put on a priority, a lot of the problems down the road will be solved.
So how confident are you that a Liberal minority government can address those concerns for you?
I think that a minority government will have to listen to us, and I think that the Nova Scotia Federation of Home and School Associations will be watching them and will be questioning what's happening. The parents need to be outspoken now and to really express how they feel, what's happening inside the classroom.
Because there's been more than just money, hasn't there? There's been 6 schools. There have been overcrowding and as you've mentioned, underfunding. Where will 6 schools come into to all of this as well?
I think that the school situations have to be fixed. It's no doubt about it. I'm not sure if the 3 Ps are the way to go with new buildings, but I'm sure that the government of tomorrow morning will start to look at those issues. The parents have to be able to realize when their child goes to school, they'll be healthy and not have to be into a building that's so old.
Thank you so much, Sandra Himmelman, for addressing this for us tonight, and again from driving in from La Have tonight. It's going to be a long night home for you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks again. That was Sandra Himmelman of the Nova Scotia Federation of Home and Schools Association. Back to you, Linda.
Thank you, Claire. Well, Jim, we must look back now on how this night came to be. And you have some thoughts on that?
Well, just reflecting a bit on the last stage of the campaign, we had that poll come out which said that the parties were even up. The NDP and the Liberals were even up. There was some questioning as to whether that was accurate. I think that pollster is going to be quite happy tonight. But clearly the Liberals at that point began to change their strategy. They switched to attack ads. In the last few days of the campaign, very strong, full-page attack ads against the NDP. What was the impact of that? Clearly it didn't have the desired impact for the Liberals because it didn't scare away NDP voters, unless it would have been actually a Liberal victory tonight, or rather an NDP victory, and that held the line a bit. But I don't think so. I think that probably that was a strategy that failed.
Thank you, Jim. We're going to Catherine, who is standing by now with some voters. Catherine.
Linda, I'm joined with Lawrence Nason. He's with the Nova Scotia Federation of Agriculture, which represents farmers and farm businesses in this province. Lawrence, what do you think a minority government will do for the rural voice?
Well, I think a minority government is probably fairly positive for rural issues. Rural issues and agricultural issues have tended to be suppressed on the political agenda in Nova Scotia for quite some time. And I think perhaps a minority government may focus in on those issues a little more straightforward and more seriously than they have in the past.
Can you give me a few examples of what you would like to see tackled first?
Well, I guess from the standpoint of agriculture, farmers in the province have about a $1.4 billion capital investment in rural Nova Scotia. And I guess we're very concerned about the state of the infrastructure in rural Nova Scotia, the state of roads, healthcare, schools. That's where we live.
There you see Robert Chisholm. There you see Robert Chisholm greeting a throng of supporters at his headquarters. A triumphant night for Robert Chisholm. He is 40 years old, first elected in 91. In a by-election in Halifax Atlantic, it was John Buchanan's old seat. He became the 3rd member of the NDP caucus. He would go on to double NDP support in the riding in the 93 election. Jubilation there tonight. He was elected leader of the NDP 2 years ago in March of 96. He is married to Paula Simon. They have a daughter named Jessie, son of a World War II fighter pilot. He grew up in Kentville, and he certainly fought for this win tonight. Studied at St. Mary's University, Dalhousie, UBC, master's degree in sociology, basking in a wonderful night at NDP headquarters right now. Jim, an interesting party leader there.
Absolutely. Robert Chisholm has turned things around for the NDP in this province in only a short period of time. He must be extremely pleased, and I'm sure that the party is looking forward to having Robert Chisholm be its leader over the next few years.
Reaching out into some regions that some of even they may not have hoped to reach.
Exactly. Not just breakthroughs in urban areas, but breakthroughs in rural areas, and it really gives a whole new face to the NDP the NDP in Nova Scotia.
A huge cheer for Robert Chisholm. Well, let's hear what the NDP leader has to say for himself tonight.
Who said this election would be boring? My friends, Nova Scotians made history tonight. I'd say that something happened on the road to the Liberal coronation. It's called democracy. People I have to thank right off the bat, of course, are my wife Paula and my daughter Jessie. They've been with me from start to finish, a huge support, and I couldn't have done it without them. Thank you very much. And I want to thank the voters of Halifax Atlantic. You have given me an opportunity to serve you once again in the legislature, and I am honored to be your representative once again. Thank you. I want to congratulate Premier MacLellan for his campaign. I also want to congratulate Dr. Hamm for a spirited campaign that always took the high road. My friends, the candidates and workers of all three parties are the people who make democracy work, and I thank all of you for having put in so many hours and so much hard work. Now, we respect the judgment of the voters. It may take us a few days to sort out what's going to happen next and what the situation will look like in the new legislature, but friends, some things are clear. We won our greatest ever vote tonight and our greatest number of seats. That it's time to get government working for ordinary people in this province. This is a great day to be a New Democrat. I wish that every single one of our candidates, a tremendous slate of candidates, could have won tonight. I want to thank all 52 NDP candidates and their workers for the best ever NDP campaign this province has ever seen. An NDP team with 20 women candidates, and we now have 5 women in the legislature. It's an NDP team that stretches from Yarmouth to Cape Breton, and with a rural vote, me being from small town Nova Scotia, that makes me proud. I want to thank everyone who put up a sign, who distributed literature, who canvassed, who spoke to their friends, their family, and their co-workers, and who helped to bring out the NDP vote. And we remember, all of us remember, the party pioneers who spent long, cold, thankless years when it wasn't always popular to be a New Democrat. And I thank our partners in the labor movement, our sisters and brothers who once again demonstrated that they are part and parcel of this party in the good times and in the bad. My friends, now we go forward. Now we go forward. It's up to the 3 political parties to make this legislature work for Nova Scotians. The parties must work together and work for Nova Scotia, and not take old battles back into the legislature. And I expect every party will want to explore the room for cooperation as we try to determine who can best form a government that will not quickly be defeated in a non-confidence motion. But my friends, let's be real clear. Whether the NDP are sitting on the government side or the opposition side of the House, Nova Scotians know whose side we're on. Ordinary Nova Scotian families, you know the NDP is on your side. Thank you to every woman and man in this province who voted for their NDP candidate. The breakthrough that we made tonight is a victory for you and for every Nova Scotian who believes that government really can work for ordinary people. My friends, it's a victory for every Nova Scotian who believes that their concerns should be government's concerns. And it's a victory for every Nova Scotian who will work with us to restore faith in our healthcare system, to ensure quality education, to achieve fair taxes, and to make jobs the bottom line. We will honor the promises that we made and the priorities that we presented in this campaign. And we will continue to be open and upfront with Nova Scotians about the issues that face our province. My friends, there is one person who I want to take the time to single out. Alexa McDonough. Alexa, we could not have done this without you. Your example, your years of courageous leadership and the Atlantic breakthrough you won on June the 2nd. Alexa, you showed Nova Scotians what it means to be a New Democrat. This breakthrough is shared with you. And it holds the promises of many more gains for the NDP right across Canada under your leadership. My friends, tomorrow morning, we'll start rolling up our sleeves and getting down to the business of making this new legislature work for ordinary Nova Scotian families. But that's tomorrow. Tonight, let's celebrate! Thank you!
Jubilation at the NDP headquarters, where you just saw Robert Chisholm addressing a throng of supporters on a fantastic night for the NDP. Well, here I am back in the Legislative Assembly. You remember, this is where it all began tonight. We started with 35 Liberals, 9 PC in the opposition, 4 NDP, but the map has changed. Let's take a walk through cyberspace and see what the chamber looks like now. There you see our animation begins. First, we'll have a look at how things looked coming into this election. And there you will see lots of Liberal red. But now, a big change. And there you see it. 20 seats at this point for the Liberals, 18 for the NDP, 14 for the Progressive Conservatives. 1 seat tonight hangs in the balance at this moment, but that's the new look of the Legislative Assembly. Lots of orange, a lot less red, more blue. That is the story so far tonight. And I'm sure Harry Flemming and Parker Barnes Donham, standing by in the Legislative Library, will have a lot to say about that. Mary Jane.
Yes, thank you, Linda. Much more colorful legislature anyway. Harry, what do you think of Robert Chisholm's speech we just heard?
A lot of what you expect. I mean, this is a very upbeat night for him, but I think in terms of the content, the most important thing he said was that the government, whether he's part of it or on the other side, that the government won't quickly be defeated on a non-confidence motion. And that's what I think we would expect, that any party that quickly forced to vote would suffer at the polls. Now we've had him indicating that he's prepared to cooperate, and we've had Dr. Hamm indicating I'd look for a government of 2.5 years.
What he did, however, twice, I think, refer to whether we sit on the government side or the other side, implying that there's still some doubt about that. Now, the only way there's doubt about that is if the Liberals face the House and are quickly defeated. Because if the Liberals govern even for 6 months and then they're defeated, tradition says the Lieutenant Governor must call a new election. But if the Liberals are quickly defeated, then he would have to turn to the NDP to form a government. So there's still some jockeying left to be done here.
Meantime, you've done some figuring out here on your own?
Yeah, I've done a tally of the occupations represented in the next legislature. We have presently 16 teachers, possibly 17 if Delphus wins Citadel, 7 lawyers, 4 farmers, 3 doctors, or 4 if Kinley wins, 3 businessmen, 2 union officers, 2 healthcare workers, 2 social workers, 2 civil servants, a broadcaster, a technician, a trucker, a surveyor, an insurance agent, a journalist, a worker for a non-government organization, a funeral director, and
your favorite,
what we delicately in rural Nova Scotia refer to as a honey truck driver.
And I might say about that one that more than twice as many educators as lawyers, and this puts the lie, and it's been many years since we have not had more educators than lawyers in the House.
How will that change the landscape, you think, with a mix like that?
Well, it's quite a diverse mix. I mean, it's an interesting mix of people, I think. That's the only point I'm making with it.
And let's talk about Premier MacLellan, if we can, just for a minute. He's gone from a huge majority going into this election when it was called a majority government to a minority. What does that say about his leadership, do you think?
Well, it says quite a bit that by the polls he had a big lead, and it dissipated as the campaign went on. But I don't see any move to unseat him at all. Now, the next thing that's of interest, who's he got to work with, make a cabinet? Francine Cosman, Manny MacDonald, Wayne Godet, Ed Lorraine, Jim Smith, Robbie Harrison, Don Down, and Kenny McCaskill survived, and 6 went down. Earlier I had Eleanor Norrie in the cabinet, but she did not go in when MacLellan became premier.
Right, Parker?
You know, you also, I think, have to remember how low the party's fortunes were when he took over the leadership. The fact is that they were headed for a Donald Cameron-style decimation under John Savage. So he brought them a long way back. The campaign was clearly badly run and badly strategized, and someone's got to wear that. Whether it will be Brian MacLellan, the lawyer, Crooks, the campaign co-chair, or MacLellan himself, remains to be seen. But he is, for the moment, still premier, likely to continue to be so at least for the next few weeks. I don't see any move to replace.
And a big win in his own riding,
and
too.
Speaking of the Liberal campaign, obviously something happened at the top, but it permeated right down through. At least in Metro, I saw very few Liberal workers that were not monumentally teed off at the way things were going.
Well, people said that they even caught their own party workers by surprise when the election call was made, that their nominations weren't done,
when you're in government and you catch your own workers by surprise, then that's a sign of monumental incompetence.
Yeah. Any thoughts on the cabinet, Parker?
Well, I think he's got a very small caucus from which to choose what we've come to expect as a fairly large cabinet. It gives him less maneuvering room. What's he do with Paul McEwen? Is he going to have to put Paul McEwen, a potential embarrassment to the government, back in the cabinet?
Can't you see Paul McEwen as Speaker in a three-way house?
Oh, can you imagine?
Another possibility is Jerry Fogarty, who was Speaker, but I
think you'll want someone, that's a very key appointment. You'll want someone pretty adroit, someone who can get along with people. That'll be a very interesting.
What do you think that if we brought back from London Arthur Donahue? Probably the best speaker we ever had.
Well, unfortunately, he wasn't elected tonight. Any chance that the Tories can broker a deal to get a cabinet seat?
I don't think they'd want to, because that would amount to a coalition. Now, there may be some sort of a what do you call it?
One of those contracts that they...
there might be some loose nut over there somewhere that might be open to a blandishment, but not too likely.
To being
a loose fish.
A loose fish. Let's go back.
Not many of them in the ocean.
Or a smelly cannon.
Let's go back to Robert Chisholm just for a minute. You both, as we were watching the speech, you were talking about Alexa McDonough in the background there and his allusion to her in the speech. What did you think of that?
My own view was that just by being there, and she is the federal leader, it sort of seemed to, in a way, steal a little bit of his limelight, but that's just a personal view.
I also think there's a great misreading about Alexa McDonough's popularity. The proof is in winning seats. Alexa McDonough never won more than 4 seats. She won 6 federally, I'll give you that, but I think there are as many Nova Scotians who are turned off hard by Alexa McDonough as there are turned on by her, and I think it's dangerous for them to keep putting her in the forefront provincially.
Let's give you a little bit of chance to gloat now. It looks like your prediction is going to hold true. We're still waiting.
There are a couple recounts. First of all, we have Halifax Citadel, the last time we saw it, had a 6-vote margin. And Pictou West, the NDP only won by 34 votes. Those are 2 places. Now, what are we showing now? Still 6?
Still 6.
So we still have 3 polls to go there. Who knows who's going to win?
I hope to make your reputation as a pundit even better than at the 2018 and 14 holes.
Well, as we said before, you did it last time. Only fitting I should do it this time.
Are they the right ridings, though, pretty much for you, or?
Well, because I thought the Cape Breton I had exactly the way it came out, and Metro, the NDP, won the lion's share of the seats here, and a handful of little breakthroughs on the mainland. Yarmouth, in particular, Pictou West, another one. That's how, because I didn't go seat by seat. Right. I went regionally and sort of, well,
for example, no real surprise that the Tories took Cumberland North, Cumberland South, and Truro-Bible Hill. Now, those were all seats that were not
What was surprising, though, was that in Truro-Bible Hill, the NDP ran second.
Yes.
Astounding.
I agree. That is surprising. And
I've spoken in that town, and there aren't a lot of socialists there.
I've spoken in that town, too.
Harry, what went wrong with your prediction? You were 26-13-13.
Vastly underestimated the NDP. A lot of people were predicting the collapse of the Tory vote. I wasn't, on the basis that their votes tend to be localized in rural Nova Scotia, and there's a lot of seats out there. The Liberal vote just kept collapsing, and the NDP, obviously June the 2nd, the federal election, was no aberration for the NDP.
Now, Harry said 2.5.
I'm sorry, I think we're going to wrap up now and go back to Linda. Something big must be happening. We'll be back later. Back to Linda.
Always love to hear from the political panel, no much more so than on election night. We are now going to join Claire McKenzie. Claire.
Thanks, Linda. I'm joined now by Dr. Kenneth Osmond, the president of St. Mary's University and a voice for the concerns of higher education here with us at Province House tonight. What have been the concerns, Dr. Osmond, of the universities throughout this election?
Well, quite a few, but I should say that all of the candidates were on our campuses right across the province. So I think they have certainly heard the concerns expressed by faculty and students and university administrators. What we're concerned about is to try and maintain and strengthen the very good higher education system we have in Nova Scotia, a system that has been somewhat hurt by the reductions in funding, as has happened to other parts of the social structure. And we need some return if we're going to maintain the strength that St. Mary's and other universities in the province have.
Now, I know that the Council for Higher Education says that a $23 million increase in funding is needed. Is that what you will be asking of this new Liberal minority government?
We will certainly be asking the government to follow through on the Council's recommendations. The funding has fallen from $210 million to the present $175 million, so you can see the situation that the universities find themselves in. And students are complaining about the fact that they have borne some of the brunt of paying for the difference.
Of course, through increased tuition fees. How confident are you that a Liberal minority government can address those concerns, can come up with the money?
Well, they've all certainly recognized the concerns, and I think more importantly, they recognize the role that the universities play in the development of the province, not just the economic development, but the social and economic development. And I think they're all very much aware of that. They're aware of the fact that we are in a knowledge economy, and aware of the fact that higher education plays a very important role in the future of the province.
And how comfortable are you with the New Democrats as the official opposition?
Well, I think they've all said many of the right things. All the parties have said many of the right things that educators like to hear. And I'm quite confident that the three parties working together will attempt to address the problems of higher education.
Well, thank you so much for coming into Province House this evening and joining us on this very exciting election night. I have been speaking with Dr. Kenneth Osmond, the president of St. Mary's University, here tonight. Linda, back to you.
One seat still hangs in the balance here tonight. What's the latest word, Jim?
The latest word is that there are count problems in Citadel, and that the chief returning officer has gone to the riding. I think it may take some time to sort it out, but evidently there are some problems.
It has been back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The one seat yet to be claimed. Who will own it? We do not know, but some interesting days ahead. We now have some pictures for you. Premier Russell MacLellan leaving his home, heading for his headquarters in Sydney Mines.
I'm sure the folks in Nova Scotia would like to hear a quick response.
And they will hear a quick response, I can assure them. Thank them all.
You up to North Sydney first?
One of the two, yeah. We'll be there.
How'd you feel generally, just when you saw the results come in?
We'll have to wait a bit longer to hear a little more from Premier Russell MacLellan.
Yeah,
not the night he had said he wanted all along, not the majority.
He must be disappointed tonight. Even though it looks like the Liberals are going to be able to form a government, they've fallen a long way, and it wasn't the homecoming, I think, that he was planning when he came back to take on the provincial leadership.
Looking back, what do you think happened? What happened in Cape Breton, first of all, where they picked up 7 but had hoped to do even better?
Well, I think their general level of support in Cape Breton was floating at an unrealistically high level. I think that the NDP, they won both those seats in Cape Breton in the federal election, and I was waiting to see some bounce back up, and there was.
Thank you so much. We're going to hear now from a man who's very excited about his party's turn of events, Robert Chisholm, standing by at the headquarters. Mr. Chisholm, what has this night been like for you?
It's been a good night, Linda. We're very proud. New Democrats are very proud of the gains that we've made in this province.
What about for you personally?
Well, it was a big night. We've worked hard. We've built on the success of others, built on the credibility that was established by Alexa McDonough, and built on the momentum that was built up during the federal victories in June.
We are all glued right now, waiting to see what's going to happen in Citadel. Any word down there what's going to happen in Citadel?
Well, I guess we'll wait and see. The last I heard that it looked good for us, but we'll see.
Why do you think so many Nova Scotians have now turned their vote to the NDP?
Well, I really think that Nova Scotians have felt betrayed, not well served by the old-style politics and by what the Liberals have done over the past 5 years. And You know, we were talking, have been in opposition, talking about the issues that affect ordinary Nova Scotians. And we put together a campaign and a platform that was very frank and very straightforward in terms of dealing with those priorities, and I think Nova Scotians appreciated that.
What kind of a role do you think you'll play as opposition now?
Well, we'll see. I mean, it's the makeup right now is something we've never ever seen before. So my commitment to Nova Scotians is to work hard, to roll up our sleeves beginning tomorrow morning to try to sort out how we can best make this legislature work for them.
I understand you spoke to John Hamm. Can you give us any details on that conversation?
Yeah, I called John and congratulated him on a very successful campaign, and the fact that I felt that his campaign always took the high road, and I wished him well for that.
Robert Chisholm, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Catherine Clark is standing by, and we'll see her in a moment. But first, Robert Chisholm.
Robert Chisholm.
Beaming.
Beaming. I'm sure that they have some entertainment scheduled for later this evening as a result of tonight's results. One thing that perhaps we should note in passing, the voter turnout was down in this election to a level we don't usually see in Nova Scotia elections. It fell about 5% or so from 75. And that may have had some impact on the outcome.
Interesting indeed. We are now going to see Catherine Clark, who's standing by. Catherine.
Hi, Linda. I'm with Jean Fay. She's with the Community Advocates Network, which is an alignment of anti-poverty groups, and they've been fighting for welfare reform in this province. How do you think this minority government is going to affect that?
Well, I think it's good news for the Community Advocates Network. Going into this election, both the PCs and the New Democrats were behind us in pushing for an open consultation on social assistance reform. The most significant reform in this province in 30 years is happening, and the Liberals have been keeping it under wraps. They have not been consulting with people directly affected.
So how do you feel tonight about this minority government, then?
Well, I think it's, as I say, I think it's good news. I think that we're going to be able to have a full open debate on social policy in this province, which is really important for persons with disabilities, for single mothers, and other people who are unemployed in the province.
Okay, thank you very much. Linda, that's Jean Fay. Back to you.
Thank you, Catherine. Well, what an incredible evening we've had here. Once again, still waiting for word on Halifax Citadel. Returning officer has gone down.
I suspect that it will be a while before we hear from Halifax Citadel. If, in fact, there are counting problems there, that usually means they have to go through quite a procedure now to get things straightened out.
We have a look now at how things are standing. The map of Nova Scotia. Let's have a look at it. And there it is, the map of Nova Scotia. What do you think of that?
The yellow doesn't show up, too. There,
well,
that's
there.
better.
Now
I was going to say,
see.
where's all the yellow? There it is. Metro Halifax, a lot of yellow seats there. A lot of orange seats. I guess orange is the correct color.
Incredible. Now and there you see Industrial Cape Breton. Big changes there as well. It will be interesting to see how they run this new government and what it will mean for Nova Scotians. The Liberals holding 20, NDP 18, Progressive Conservatives 14, one seat yet to be claimed.
One seat yet to be claimed, but I think that we know what's going to happen now. It's going to be a minority government. The Liberals are going to meet the legislature as the government, and the two opposition parties have made it clear that they're not going to bring the government down. They're going to cooperate and try to make it work for a while. So we are going to have a totally new situation to Nova Scotians because we've never had a functioning minority government before, and it looks like that's what we're going to have for the next while.
Interesting. Are there any particular grounds that a minority government can be? Oh, one moment. We're going to Russell MacLellan's headquarters here in Sydney Mines.
How do you Did you expect this result, Mr. MacLellan?
Well, I'm just going to get behind here, okay? Let's see. All right.
Can we go up? Children, okay? Okay. How are you doing?
At his headquarters.
Good evening. I want to thank all of you so very much for all of your hard work. While I was on the campaign trail, you looked after Cape Breton North for me, and the result was tremendous. I can't thank you enough for your hard work and your support and your confidence. It was a tremendous victory in this riding. There's no question about that. Unfortunately, we didn't win as many seats in the province as I would have liked. However, we did quite well. And I want to say to those who lost their seats, my colleagues in the legislature, how badly I feel for their loss. We lost some very good people, great members of cabinet, great MLAs, and I feel extremely badly for them and their families and their supporters. We're going to have to work again in the party and build it up, and we'll do that. We're still in power. Things just don't come easy.
It's all right.
So what? I know. So what we're going to have to do in the Liberal Party is go back to the drawing board, and we will. But we'll be in power, and we'll provide excellent government. I didn't get to hear Mr. Chisholm, but I do want to congratulate Mr. Chisholm and the NDP on the excellent showing they made. They're to be congratulated. They did extremely well. I did hear Mr. Hamm's remarks. They were very conciliatory, very good, and I'm not surprised because I've known John Hamm for a long time, and he's a class guy. And I want to congratulate him on how well he and his party did. I look forward to working with both parties in the legislature. I look forward to working with you, as I said before, on building this great province and doing things that need to be done here in this riding, Cape Breton, and all through the province of Nova Scotia. I'm not going to change. I've said that we're going to give good government, whether it's a majority or a minority. That doesn't change. There is no promise that we made that will not be kept. There is nothing that we have done in this campaign or will do in the months ahead that will in any way reflect detrimentally on the Liberal Party. We will be ready when the next provincial election comes. We'll be stronger, and we will have an even more solid record to give to the people of Nova Scotia. I want to say to you and all of the people of Nova Scotia that as long as I'm Premier of this province, every waking hour will go to the work that needs to be done in Nova Scotia, and it will be done in a way in which all Nova Scotians can be proud. There's a lot that has to be done in Nova Scotia, but we do have these opportunities, as I have said, and we will make the best of them, as I have said, and we'll do them in conjunction with the people of this province, as I've said, and we will build a future in Nova Scotia that is the equal, or if not the best, in Canada, as I have said. Nothing changes, except we don't have as many members as I would have liked. I said the last 7 months that I was in sudden death overtime. Well, it looks like we're gone into a second period of sudden death overtime.
I love your attitude, Russell. Keep it going, Russell.
But we will give the government that Nova Scotians expect from us. There's a proud tradition in the Liberal Party of serving the people, of not doing anything which in any way would leave a legacy that would be detrimental to the Liberal Party. And that will continue. I want to thank you all again, and to the people of Nova Scotia. You have spoken, you've made your decision. I respect the decision you've made. Politics isn't easy, and I know that, but unfortunately a lot of people get hurt, but that's the name of the game, I guess. But we've had a lot of good people running in this campaign with a lot of good workers supporting them. And we will come back, and I know they will work with us to strengthen the Liberal Party to an even greater degree. This is not to deter us. The future is for us to challenge and for us to grasp. And the Liberal Party, as long as it's in power, will do that. I want to thank my wife and my children for the sacrifice they have made in this campaign. And I want to thank all of you again. This is a great party. You're tremendous people, and this is why we will always ultimately be successful as a party, because of the quality of the people we have. And in Nova Scotia, we have a great people that will, if we give them the lead, work with us for the future that we in the Liberal Party envision. Thank you very, very much.
Premier Russell MacLellan addressing supporters at his headquarters in Sydney Mines. Well, he said, Jim, that he would keep his promises, be ready for the next election. What do you think?
Well, I think all the party leaders make it sound wonderful. They make it sound like we're going to have a very cooperative legislature that will end up with good government as a result. But I'm not so sure it's so easy to bring about.
We have the Premier now standing by in Sydney Mines with Paul Withers.
What are you going to do now?
I'm going to speak to you.
I mean tomorrow in terms of government.
We're nothing earth-shaking. We're going to continue to govern. We're going to continue to govern as we said we would. Everything I said in the campaign is the way we're going to conduct ourselves, and nothing changes.
What about approaches to Dr. Hamm? You noted his gracious speech. Where can you work with this man to stay in power?
Well, we're in power, and what we will do is provide the government that we think Nova Scotians want. If they don't want it, then maybe we will be defeated.
Will you form a coalition?
No, I won't. No.
Why will you not form?
No. Nothing went wrong. It's just a message that perhaps didn't succeed, or maybe it wasn't the right message. But the campaign went well. You don't win them all the way you would like to.
But you didn't come home from Ottawa to end up with this political flag.
Well, when I came home from Ottawa, I wasn't really given any guarantees of anything.
Can you tell us why you wouldn't be interested in forming a coalition? Why would that be in the interest of Nova Scotia?
We were the ones that won the largest number of seats. People expect us to give good government. We're prepared to be accountable for what we do. We can't be accountable if we're also trying to watch over our shoulders for other people in the government.
What's the common ground that you have with the opposition parties? I mean, where can you work?
Well, I think the opposition parties want this province to move ahead. I think they want good government, and I think they're quite prepared to work with us. I'm not saying they're going to give us a blank check, nor would I expect them to, frankly. But I think they want to work with us. And I mean, I want to say that at this stage, the last thing we can do is get queasy about what we're doing. This province has to continue to have good leadership. Now, I'm going to do whatever I have to do. If if it's upping my vitamins or working longer hours or whatever. Paul, I mean, I cannot, in any sense of the word, reduce what I think is the leadership that this province needs. Everybody's looking at us, the oil industry, the gas industry, the whole country, to see if we're going to blink, and we're not going to blink.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Russell MacLellan, and back to you, Linda Kelly, in Halifax.
Thank you, Paul. Well, there you hear it. Some interesting thoughts from the Premier at this point.
I'm not sure what he means by blinking and what it means not to blink. I heard something very similar from Joe Clark during his minority government. He said, we're going to govern as if we had a majority. And 9 months later, Joe Clark was out on his ear. I think the Premier, when he says that, has to realize that minority government is not majority government, and he will have to govern differently.
We are now going for a slightly different perspective back to Bruce McKinnon, who's standing by in the Chronicle Herald building, hard at work at his sketchboard. Bruce McKinnon, what do you think of tonight?
Well, it's pretty much the way I knew it was going to go, Linda. I called it this way all along. But I did that little backup cartoon earlier just to impress people with how fast I could draw and how many cartoons I could do in one day.
And we are dazzled. What are you up to now?
Well, I've got a bit of a different picture on the go. This one, there's a little hair on the floor. And I've got the Premier with a new haircut and saying, wow, that was a close shave. So
we are dazzled once again by your work. Bruce McKinnon, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks a lot, Linda.
Well, there you are. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, Bill Carr is lurking in the building. He now that you've had your chance at the ballot box, Bill Carr, who's been hanging around all evening, will now get his chance to put in the final word, and here he is.
I just needed to be alone for a second. I'm not upset because there's a minority government. I'm not upset about that at all. In fact, I'm glad there's a minority government because, you know, that way there's a minority government and then there's a whole lot of people in the opposition to yell at them and tell them what to do, you know, and keep good checks and balances. So actually a minority government's probably like good government. The only people that don't like minority governments are, well, governments. No, that's not why I'm upset. See, what I'm upset about is every time Linda would say, you know, like, declare a winner, I kept thinking, yeah, right, you're also declaring two losers. I'm sorry it's harsh, but there's nothing else you can call them. I mean, you know, they spend all that money and they spend all that time running around making promises, you know, and smiling and stuff, and all of a sudden, like, 10 minutes they're losers. You know, I just feel bad for them. I mean, one of the losers was interviewed and they trying to put a brave face on it, and she said, you know, sometimes a defeat isn't a defeat. Yes, it is, loser. And what does the loser get to do? I mean, the winners can you know, go out tomorrow and walk around knowing everybody likes them the best. And they can go out and wave at the bridge and stuff, you know. It's a cheesy thing to do, but Buchanan did it for years. What does the loser get to do? Loser gets to go home and go, hi, honey, I'm a loser. And they go to those really bad parties afterwards and thank the supporters, you know, who only want to drink anyway, you know, because it's a terrible situation. And that's how they feel. But I know you're thinking, oh, you don't really care, Bill, because nothing you enjoy more than getting a bunch of new politicians to pick on, drag through the mud, and, you know, and ridicule. Which is true, I do love that. But just tonight, I just feel bad for the losers. You know, here in the legislature, feeling a bit tender. I'm Bill Carr. Oh, what's this? Gum. Juicy fruit. Poor losers.
Oh my goodness, someone get Bill Carr a tissue and maybe his own package of gum. Bill Carr, thank you so much for that. We do love the final word from Bill Carr. We are now, I believe, going back to check in on Harry Flemming and Parker Barr-Stenham.
Yes, thank you, Linda. We're back here in the Legislative Library with the pundits of all pundits. What did you think of the Premier?
He sounded defiant but conciliatory, that he's going to stick to his guns, that he is not going to be sucking up to the opposition, but he didn't say something that I'd hoped he would, that he'd be calling the House into session within, say, 3-4 weeks and present a budget. And it will be a budget on which he will either stand or fall.
The question on which so much turned in this election, if you don't bring in a balanced budget, will you resign? is no longer quite as academic as it was 3 weeks ago when it was first broached in the leaders' debate. I think at a minimum he now has to produce a balanced budget, or Hamm would have very little choice but to vote against it. I thought too that, as I thought in the debate, of the three speeches we heard tonight from the leaders, Hamm was clearly the best. I mean, it wasn't a great speaking style or anything, but in tone, in dignity and conciliatoriness, it was the best, and I think I would have to put Chisholm's as the worst. MacLellan, I think he's, acting defiant, I don't know, defiant but conciliatory is a little oxymoronic, but it's clear that he does plan to try to govern, and he certainly has the right to try to do that.
Harry, quick last word. We have to wrap up here.
Well, to relate to what Parker said, for a guy that never won a single week of the campaign, I think MacLellan's still premier, isn't he?
Yes, and not often you get to lose 19 seats and still get to be premier.
All right, well, thank you very much from the library. We'll go back to Linda now.
Well, what a night it's been here. Incredible.
It's not over yet.
No, it's not. We are still waiting to see what happens with Halifax Citadel. Now, at last word, Jim?
The last word was that there appears to be 3 ballot boxes that aren't accounted for. And certainly there's a major review of everything in that riding that went on tonight at the moment. So we don't know yet how that's going to turn out, but it could just as easily be an NDP
Jim,
seat as a Liberal seat.
We've just heard that Kinley is conceding that he has lost, even though the numbers are still in question. Kinley conceding.
5 votes behind. And I don't know what the extent of the counting is, or any further has to be done. But if that's the way it is, we'll have to assume that Mr. Delafis has won. So that's the latest we have. And I would think it'll be on TV, and we won't get any more calls. I don't think. Will we? All the counting is done for tonight.
Pretty much for tonight.
Yeah.
Now, the counting is done for tonight. He has, I'm told, conceded.
Well, he clearly conceded.
So that now brings it to 19 NDP.
1919, although officially that can't be changed on the mini board there, but he's conceded. It would appear to be a case where the NDP and the Liberals will be tied with 19 seats apiece. Well, even under that scenario, the Liberals will come back as the government.
All right. We have to take a run through before we go. We want to check in on the ridings. And here we go. First of all, taking a look at the overall 22, of course, Citadel, the leading and elected question at this point. 20 for the Liberals, 18 for the NDP, 14 for the Progressive Conservatives.
I think we should remind voters that really should be 1919.
1919 at this point. Nova Scotia vote change there. You see it, a drop picked up by a drop from the Liberals, picked up by the NDP,
yeah,
a slight drop by the PCs. Now into Cape Breton. And there you see it, 10 of 10 ridings, 7 for the Liberals, 3 for the NDP, and the Progressive Conservatives lost their 1 seat in Cape Breton. Alfie MacLeod is gone. The vote change, the drop of 15.5 percentage points picked up at this point by the NDP. Progressive Conservatives leading. On now to Cape Breton Centre, where you see Frank Corbett elected. Steve Drake gave him a run for his money, but defeated in the end. The NDP pick up what was a Liberal seat. Cape Breton East. This was a Liberal seat as well. Reeves Matheson picks it up with more than 5,000
votes. Those are solid NDP victories there.
Up next, Cape Breton North. Russell MacLellan, of course, took his own seat, early battle, but picked it up with some assurance later on. Cape Breton Nova, Paul McEwen will be back representing the people of Cape Breton Nova. A margin of almost 900 votes when it was called.
A strong NDP showing there.
Still strong NDP showing, that's right, Jim. But on now to Cape Breton South, Manning MacDonald, Economic Development Minister, will be back, elected by a wide margin there. Cape Breton the Lakes, Helen MacDonald picked it up in a by-election, and she will return as an MLA for Cape Breton the Lakes. That was Bernie Boudreau's riding before the by-election. We go now to Cape Breton West. Russell McKinnon is back, defeating his nearest challenger, the NDP candidate, Slaney Alfie MacLeod, is defeated. We go on now to Inverness, where the Liberals have held the riding. It was Charlie MacArthur's, it's now Charlie MacDonald's, and there you see the margin that he won. We go on now to Richmond. This was Richie Mann Spokane seat. The Liberals have hung on to it. Michelle Sampson has taken the seat. Victoria now, where Kenny McCaskill is back. The Minister of Natural Resources is back, heading back to represent the people of Victoria. On now to...
And in 2 of those Cape Breton seats, the NDP finished second, which is worth
interesting
noting.
indeed. Northeast Nova Scotia, the Progressive Conservatives taking 6 here. The NDP, the Liberals 4, the NDP 1. We're going to have a look now at how the vote changed in northeastern Nova Scotia. Actually, we won't. We're going to move on now instead to take a look at some of the ridings. No, there is the vote change. A gain of 6 percentage points for the Progressive Conservatives there.
And there's a big jump in the NDP vote there in rural Nova Scotia.
Indeed, almost 14 percentage points. Highland Fraser will go to the House for the people of Antigonish. It was Bill Gillis's riding. The Liberals keep it.
Look at that NDP vote. That really hurt the Conservative candidate.
On we go. Brooke Taylor, opposition transportation critic, an outspoken gentleman. He will be back for the people of Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley. In Colchester North, Ed Lorraine, the Agriculture Minister, is back. He is elected. You see the margin there at this point. Cumberland North. Ernie Fage picked it up first in a November by-election. He now returns for the people of Cumberland North. Cumberland South, Murray Scott has taken this. This was Guy Brown's seat. Mike Uberoy was not able to hold the seat for the Liberals. We head now to the Eastern Shore, where Keith Caldwell was able to hold his seat. The NDP was the nearest challenger there, and it was his seat coming in, and he takes it out. Guysborough Port Hawkesbury, after a long night of backing and forthing and toing and froing, Ray White takes his seat, keeps it for another session. We move on now to Pictou Centre, where John Hamm won over Roseanne Skoke, who had challenged the Liberal leadership unsuccessfully and unsuccessful.
It's a big margin, too.
In this election as well. We move on now to Pictou East. Jim DeWolf picks up this seat. Incumbent Wayne Fraser is defeated. In Pictou West, Charlie Parker is in, but look at the margin. Only 34 votes. A recount likely there.
Almost definitely a recount.
Luke Young is the next challenger. Truro Bible Hill, Eleanor Norrie is gone. Jamie Muir is in for the people of Truro Bible Hill. He'll head to Province House. Up next, the Metro ridings, and there you see it, very much the story tonight. The NDP elected in 12 of the 16 seats, the Liberals only holding 4.
And there's that one seat in which the Liberals are shown as leading, but in fact it may be an NDP.
That is correct. We wait for more word on that. The NDP carrying 45% of the vote in Metro. That's a gain of almost 14.5 percentage points. And you can see they took it at the expense of the other 2 parties. Francine Cosman is back for the Liberals. She is elected again. We go now to Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage, where Kevin DeVoe has taken the seat. This was a Liberal seat coming in. Not anymore. The NDP take it. Dartmouth Cole Harbour is next. Darrell Dexter defeats Cabinet Minister Alan Mitchell. He was Justice Minister, not anymore. A new face coming to the legislature. Another, this would be Dr. Jim Smith from Dartmouth East. He won his seat and will be back. Dartmouth North now. Jerry Pye, well-known local politician, defeats 2 other well-known local politicians to take the seat for the NDP. Dartmouth South. There you see it. This was John Savage's riding. Don Chard takes that for the NDP. Bruce Hetherington, 500 votes behind him. Halifax Atlantic, of course, Robert Chisholm picked that one up. Darren Watts, the young Liberal candidate, doing all right for his first go out, I'd say.
I would say.
Next, we have Halifax Bedford Basin, where outspoken dentist Errol Gom was not able to hold on. Former Speaker Mr. Fogarty's back. We move on now to Halifax Shabukto. Howard Epstein is in. And Halifax Citadel, Peter Delafis.
Well, they're calling that an NDP victory now.
And there you see it. It has just
Citadel
flipped.
has flipped, so
that is all of
we
the
have
seats.
a tie.
This is the final picture for election 98, and there you see on the mini board the Liberals with 19, the NDP with 19, the Progressive Conservatives with 14. Halifax Fairview, let's keep on going, and there you see Eileen O'Connell is back, and back by a wide margin. Onward now to Halifax Needham, and there Maureen MacDonald picks up a Liberal seat. It was Cabinet Minister Gerald O'Malley's seat. Preston, Yvonne Atwell picks that up for the NDP, defeating a Cabinet Minister. Environment Minister Wayne Adams is gone. Sackville Beaverbank, Bill McDonald is gone. The Liberals lose that seat to the NDP. Rosemary Godden, I should say. And Sackville-Cobequid, John Hamm is back again. Back on to Timberley Prospect now, where Bruce Holland, Cabinet Minister again, defeated at the hands of the NDP. Bill Estabrooks will take that seat and come to represent the people of Timberley Prospect. Here's a look at the South Shore and what went on there tonight. 3-2-2. There you see it. We're going to have a look at how the vote changed over the evening, and there you see it. The Liberals, although they held 38% of the vote, that marks a drop of just over 16 percentage points for them. The NDP picking it up, the Progressive Conservatives taking up just a little bit more. Here we see Heinrich Bitter-Surman has defeated Cabinet Minister Jim Barkhouse. He will now represent the people of Chester St. Margaret's in the next sitting. Lunenburg, Lila O'Connor has lost her seat. Michael Baker picks it up for the Progressive Conservatives. In Lunenburg West, however, Don Down, Cabinet Minister, was able to hold the riding with a comfortable margin. We move on to Queens now. John Leaf, speaking of comfortable margins, back again, once again. Shelburne now. The Huskelson rule continues. Clifford Huskelson wins the seat. Cecil O'Donnell for the Progressive Conservatives, his closest challenger. Annapolis now is coming up. 6 out of the 6 ridings, the Progressive Conservatives picked up 3, the Liberals 2, and 1 for the NDP. And this is how the vote changed in Annapolis Valley. You can see the NDP at the bottom picking up the biggest chunk of the vote change there.
And again, a strong NDP vote in a rural area there. So, and they also went up a lot in South Shore, although they didn't get any seats to show for it.
Lauren Montgomery takes the seat. Basil Stewart, not close enough. Close, but not close enough. The Liberals hold the seat. It was Earl Rayfuse's. We move on to Hants East, where Rob McDonnell has taken the seat. The NDP pick up Hants East. Hants West now. Ron Russell is back again. He will go and represent the people of Hants West once again. Kings North, George Archibald, he's back again. He's been in for a number of years, and he's back again. Kings South now. This was one watched all through the campaign. Some question what would happen, but Robbie Harrison has held the seat. The education
three-way
minister.
split in the vote there, and that certainly helped him out there.
He held on. Kings West, George Moody is back once again, and back by, I might add, a generous margin. We're going to take a look now at southwest Nova Scotia. And there you see it. That's how it all shook down in southwest Nova Scotia. PCs 2, the Liberals and the NDP splitting the difference. Look how close the vote is, though.
Yeah. Again, the NDP breakthrough there is noteworthy in Yarmouth, and their vote climbing.
All right. Argyll, there you see. Alistair Surratt is gone. Cabinet Minister for Human Resources defeated by Neil LeBlanc, a former Buchanan Cabinet Minister. My, interesting times we will have. Wayne Gaudette, however, fended off the other LeBlanc, Guy LeBlanc, to hold his own seat. He returns once again in Clare. Now on to Digby Annapolis. This was Joe Casey's for many years. The Liberals were not able to hold it. Gordon Balser picks this one up for the Progressive Conservatives. And now in Yarmouth, a big NDP win here. John DeVoe wins, and look at the margin he won by, over 1,000 votes. And here it is. Here is the picture, Jim.
19-14, we have a tie in this election. Both the NDP and the Liberals have won 19 seats. The Conservatives with a strong 14-seat total, and unprecedented. Nowhere else in Canada has there ever been a result like that.
And look at this once more, the share of the vote. There you see the Liberals holding on to 35%, the NDP right behind 34.7%, and right behind them the Progressive Conservatives. There you see the actual votes that they won. The Independents polling down at the bottom, 1,331 for the Independents. So what a night it has been, and we're going to check in now with the political panel.
All right, Parker, you lost.
I know, I missed her by 1 seat.
Maybe on the recount.
Maybe.
Recount, and there probably will be recounted at least a couple of ridings. It was an exciting night tonight, but the next month in Nova Scotia politics is going to be exciting. Russell MacLellan has to call the legislature within the next month. He doesn't have any choice about that, and Hamm has a big decision to make.
I guess he does. Harry, what's your take on this?
I agree with Parker.
Oh my heavens!
No, he has to show that he is capable of governing, and the quick way, as I said before, is to bring in a budget that is balanced and dare the opposition
to defeat him.
To defeat him, because they're both for balanced budgets as well, although they're also for a lot of spending. They would square the circle, but he has to put them on the spot. He can't be pussyfooting around on a budget.
Whoever
maybe
forces,
other things.
But the thing is, they could defeat him, and it won't force an election. It would then force the NDP to try to govern.
That's right. They would have to.
So that's where Hamm has a difficult decision to make. Was he better off with a Liberal government, Liberal minority government, or is Hamm better off with an NDP minority government? And I frankly don't know the answer to that question.
Few seconds left. All right, well, it's been a pleasure being with you guys tonight.
What a night, eh?
I couldn't have asked for better companions to watch the election with. Thank you very much, Harry Flemming and Parker Bars Donham. Hope we do it again, but not too soon. Linda.
Well, it has been an unbelievable evening. It was a race to the wire between the Liberals and the NDP, with the PCs not far behind. The Liberals held on to enough seats to win a bare minority in the 57th General Assembly. For the first time in history, the NDP has qualified for status as the official opposition. That makes the NDP the biggest winners, but even the Tories won more seats than last time. The losers were clearly the Liberals, and that puts the leadership of Premier Russell MacLellan under some scrutiny. You, the voters, have spoken, and now it's up to the politicians to figure out what the message was. In the days to come, some of the confusion will begin to sort itself out. In the meantime, politics in this province promises to be as interesting in the coming session as it has at any time in history, so do stay tuned. Jim, a closing thought from you.
Well, the 1990s have been a decade of change in Nova Scotia politics, and I think that this election just confirms that the change is continuing, and we're into a whole new ballgame now in Nova Scotia.
And that is all from Province House tonight. Jim, I'd like to thank you so much for coming in to ride shotgun tonight.
Thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed it.
A great evening. Thanks to Mary Jane Weber, Harry Parker, and of course our political cartoonist Bruce McKinnon at the Chronicle Herald. Thanks also to the rest of our on-air crew: Paul Withers in Sydney, Cynthia Kent in New Glasgow, Laurie Graham at the Lord Nelson Hotel. Also, Bruce Rainey at Dalhousie University, Clara McKenzie and Catherine Clark here at Province House. And thanks also to Bill Carr and the many people behind the scenes in Halifax and Sydney, as well as our national election team who made this broadcast possible. And finally, a special note of thanks to the helpful staff at this historic House of Assembly. We have had an incredible evening here tonight. Our thanks to everyone. We hope you enjoyed our election special. I'm Linda Kelly. Good night from Province House.
Returns Monday, April 6th on CBC.